What if entire civilizations with thriving cities, advanced knowledge, and complex societies vanished without a trace, leaving behind only whispers carved in stone and buried beneath layers of time? Imagine walking through ruins where once lively streets echoed with the footsteps of millions, only to find silence. History is filled with marvels that defy explanation, structures that seem impossibly precise, and artifacts that hint at knowledge we barely understand today. Yet, despite their brilliance, these societies simply disappeared. What unseen forces could have erased them so completely? Was it nature's fury, internal collapse, or something far stranger lurking beyond the realm of our comprehension? From sun-scorched deserts to dense, forgotten jungles, remnants of these lost worlds challenge everything we think we know about human history. They whisper secrets of ingenuity, resilience, and, perhaps, cautionary tales about the fragility of civilizations. So, sit back, relax, and let's journey into the shadows of the past, exploring the mysteries of civilizations that time almost forgot, and uncover the stories that history left behind. Along the dusty plains of what is now modern-day Pakistan and northwest India, the remnants of a civilization lie quietly beneath the earth. Sunlight glints off the fragments of fired bricks and scattered pottery, casting shadows over streets that were once meticulously planned, now fractured by time. This is the Indus Valley, home to one of the world's earliest urban societies, a civilization that flourished over 4,000 years ago. As you walk, or imagine walking, through the silent avenues of Mohenjo-Daro or Harappa, there is a rhythm to the ruins, a pattern in the streets and granaries that speaks to an intelligence far beyond simple survival. Grid-like city layouts, sophisticated drainage systems, and standardized weights and measures hint at an advanced social organization, yet the people themselves remain almost entirely invisible to us, their voices lost to millennia. Archaeologists have unearthed thousands of artifacts, intricately carved seals, terracotta figurines, and tools of daily life, each revealing glimpses into a world both familiar and enigmatic. Yet, no monumental palaces, no grand tombs, no overt symbols of kings or rulers have been discovered. Who governed these cities? How did they coordinate such complex urban planning across hundreds of miles? And why, suddenly, did this civilization, so carefully structured and resilient, vanish from history? Some suggest climate change, a shifting monsoon pattern, the drying of rivers, or catastrophic floods, may have slowly eroded the foundations of this society. Others point to the possibility of disease or internal strife, subtle yet devastating pressures that could unravel even the most organized of communities. And then there are the more speculative theories, born in part from the silence left by the Indus script, which has yet to be deciphered. Could these people have possessed knowledge now lost to us, or even connections to distant civilizations we scarcely imagine? The artifacts themselves provide no direct answers, only questions, seals etched with unknown symbols, mysterious figurines of animals and humans, and the carefully constructed Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro, a communal structure that hints at ritual, hygiene, or social ceremony, yet resists definitive interpretation. What fascinates historians and archaeologists alike is the consistency and sophistication across the Indus Valley's urban centers. Cities separated by hundreds of miles appear to share architectural techniques, standard brick sizes, and a uniformity in weights and measures that implies a centralized system of communication, or at least a shared cultural framework. And yet, unlike Mesopotamia or ancient Egypt, there are no decipherable texts proclaiming the deeds of kings, no explicit religious iconography revealing the worldview of the inhabitants. For a civilization so structured, their silence is profound. What did they value most? and why has so little of their inner life survived for us to study? Excavations continue to uncover fragments of daily life, pottery vessels with traces of grains, tools fashioned for agriculture, and jewelry suggesting a society that appreciated aesthetics as much as utility. Each discovery adds depth, but also new puzzles. How did trade networks function across such vast distances? Why do some cities appear to have been abandoned almost abruptly? And what can the subtle shifts in material culture tell us about social changes, migrations, or external pressures? Every artifact, every broken brick, seems to whisper a story that is tantalizingly incomplete. The Indus script itself remains one of the greatest enigmas. Hundreds of symbols are inscribed on seals, yet despite decades of effort, no definitive translation has been achieved. Some propose it may represent a proto-writing system, perhaps a mnemonic device rather than a full language. Others speculate it could encode religious or commercial information lost to time. Each symbol is a key without a lock, a door waiting to be opened but stubbornly refusing entry. And without it, much of the civilization's internal logic, the beliefs, governance, and social norms, remains hidden, leaving historians to navigate a landscape of educated conjecture and carefully weighed speculation. In many ways, the Indus Valley is defined by what we do not know. It challenges our assumptions about early human development, urging us to consider that sophistication need not always leave behind obvious markers of power or conquest. The precision of their urban planning, the meticulous construction of their homes, and the apparent egalitarian nature of their society suggest a culture profoundly organized, yet quietly egalitarian, an anomaly in the ancient world. And as we piece together what we can, the gaps themselves become as intriguing as the evidence, reminding us that history is rarely a full story. It is a mosaic of fragments, each requiring interpretation, each inviting wonder. So, as we trace the faint outlines of streets and gaze upon the remains of baths, granaries, and marketplaces, we're left with questions rather than answers. Who were the people who built these cities with such care? How did they live, love, and govern themselves? And ultimately, why did they disappear so completely, leaving behind a civilization that is at once astonishingly advanced and maddeningly silent? The Indus Valley remains a whisper across millennia, a riddle embedded in bricks and clay. Perhaps one day, further discoveries will illuminate their story, but for now, it is a reminder of the limits of our knowledge and the vast, quiet mysteries that the past still holds. As the echoes of the Indus Valley fade behind us, we turn our gaze to the lush, undulating landscapes of what is now central Nigeria. Here, along the verdant plateaus and river valleys, the earth guards the remnants of a civilization that flourished over 2 millennia ago, the Nok Culture. Unlike the sprawling urban grids of the Indus, the Nok left no monumental cities, no streets paved with uniform bricks, no vast granaries or public baths. Instead, their presence is marked by the mysterious traces of artistry and ingenuity. Fragments of terracotta sculptures, stone tools, and the faint outlines of settlements revealed through careful excavation. These artifacts hint at a people who were not only skilled in survival, but also possessed a deeply rooted aesthetic sensibility. The terracotta figures of the Nok culture are particularly striking. Some stand just a few inches tall, while others soar nearly 3 feet, their faces rendered with startling realism, elongated heads, and expressive features that seem almost to breathe. Each sculpture captures a human form frozen in thought or movement, and yet, the purpose behind these creations remains an enigma. Were they ancestral representations, ritual objects, or symbols of social status? We can only speculate. The meticulous craftsmanship suggests a society with specialized skills and a cultural depth that belies the sparse archaeological record. Archaeologists have uncovered smelted iron tools and fragments of pottery scattered across the landscape, evidence that the Nok were early iron workers, producing tools and implements that would influence later societies across West Africa. Yet, unlike the Indus Valley, where evidence of urban organization is abundant, the Nok settlements appear relatively modest. Their layout inferred more from clusters of artifacts than from structured ruins. How did these communities sustain themselves? What social structures governed their lives? The answers remain frustratingly elusive. The geographical context of the Nok adds to the intrigue. Their heartlands lie in regions of rolling savanna, punctuated by rocky outcrops and intermittent rivers. In such an environment, agriculture, hunting, and gathering would have shaped daily life, yet the sophistication of their material culture suggests a society capable of complex organization, even if its scale was intimate compared to the sprawling cities of Asia or Mesopotamia. Were they connected to wider trade networks? Evidence of early iron production hints at the possibility, yet no definitive links to distant civilizations have been confirmed. The Nok remain, in many ways, an isolated enigma. Perhaps the most confounding aspect of the Nok culture is its sudden disappearance. By around 300 CE, the Nok civilization seems to vanish from the archaeological record. No cataclysmic events are clearly documented. There are no accounts of invasion, famine, or widespread disease, at least none that have survived in the archaeological or oral record. Yet, as if turning a page in history, the Nok artifacts cease, leaving behind only scattered remnants buried beneath centuries of soil. How does a culture with such evident skill in artistry, metallurgy, and community life simply fade into obscurity? Was it gradual assimilation into emerging societies, environmental pressures, or perhaps shifts in trade routes that led to their decline? The truth remains hidden beneath the layers of time. Speculative theories abound, as they often do with civilizations shrouded in mystery. Some scholars propose that climatic changes, such as the expansion of arid conditions, could have disrupted agricultural productivity, compelling communities to disperse. Others consider social factors, internal migrations, evolving cultural practices, or the rise of neighboring societies that absorbed Nok populations and knowledge. Yet, unlike more extensively chronicled civilizations, the Nok left no written records, no decipherable script to illuminate their worldviews, governance, or spiritual life. Their voice comes only through the silent testimony of terracotta and iron, and it speaks in riddles. Each discovery deepens the mystery. Small villages of scattered pottery shards give way to isolated burials containing iron tools, while the terracotta figures suggest an artistry and attention to detail that implies communal or spiritual significance. Why, for instance, did the Nok sculpt their figures with such pronounced, often exaggerated features? Were these stylistic choices purely aesthetic, or did they convey symbolic meaning, perhaps reflecting identity, status, or even ritualized beliefs? Some theorists suggest the elongated heads may indicate forms of head shaping practiced within the community, or they may carry spiritual significance lost to us now. The absence of written documentation leaves these questions tantalizingly open. The distribution of Nok artifacts also raises intriguing questions about their society and influence. Objects have been found across hundreds of kilometers of the Nigerian landscape, suggesting the possibility of widespread networks of interaction or migration. Did the Nok travel extensively, trading knowledge, art, and ironworking skills with neighboring communities? Or did the artifacts remain localized, pointing to pockets of cultural development that eventually dissipated? The sparse and fragmented record ensures that we cannot know for certain. Yet each find reinforces the impression of a people whose ingenuity and creativity were remarkable. even if the structures of their society were not monumental. In contemplating the Nok, we are reminded of the delicate interplay between presence and absence in history. They offer a case study in how a culture can leave a profound, tangible mark on material culture while leaving almost no direct trace of its social structures, beliefs, or day-to-day life. There is a quiet fascination in this ambiguity, a subtle invitation to consider the lives of people who, despite their disappearance, continue to speak across centuries through the artistry of their hands. As we examine the Nok terracottas, iron tools, and the faint traces of their settlements, a profound question emerges. How many civilizations like the Nok have risen, flourished, and faded without leaving the kinds of monuments that dominate our histories? And what lessons might they carry, hidden within the layers of soil and time, about resilience, adaptation, and the fragility of human achievement? The Nok culture, like the Indus Valley before it, reminds us that the story of humanity is as much defined by the mysteries it leaves behind as by the civilizations whose names we remember. In the quiet hills and river valleys of central Nigeria, the Nok speak to us in fragments, urging patience, observation, and imagination. And even as we piece together the story from terracotta and iron, from scattered settlements and enigmatic artistry, we must acknowledge that much of their world remains veiled. What did daily life feel like? How did their communities organize, celebrate, or mourn? Perhaps these answers lie still buried, waiting for future generations to uncover. For now, the Nok remain a whisper across the ages, a testament to human ingenuity, and a mystery that beckons us to look closer, listen more intently, and wonder what other stories are hidden beneath the earth. As we leave the rolling savannas of Central Africa and the quiet artistry of the Nok behind, our journey takes us northward, across the Aegean winds and along the jagged coastline of what is now southwestern Turkey. Here, perched on cliffs that plunge dramatically into the turquoise waters of the Mediterranean, lies the ancient land of Lycia, a region both breathtaking in its natural beauty and enigmatic in its history. The Lycian landscape is dotted with rock-cut tombs, fortified hilltop settlements, and temples that seem to emerge from the mountains themselves, carved meticulously into stone as though the cliffs themselves were willing collaborators in human ambition. Walking, or even imagining walking, through these sun-bleached ruins, one senses an intimate connection between people and terrain, a civilization attuned to the rhythm of both sea and stone. The Lycians are first recorded in Greek sources, yet much about them remains elusive. Their language, partially deciphered but still fragmentary, hints at a unique culture distinct from their neighbors in Anatolia. Their tombs, often sculpted high into cliff faces or shaped like miniature houses, are silent testaments to a society with elaborate funerary traditions, yet they reveal little about the daily lives or governance of those who built them. What inspired the Lycians to embed their dead so dramatically into the cliffs? Was it reverence, a desire for protection, or a symbolic gesture ensuring the deceased would remain in eternal vigilance over their homeland? The questions arise naturally, and the answers remain just out of reach. Archaeological excavations have uncovered Lycian cities such as Xanthos and Patara, each with remnants of marketplaces, theaters, and civic buildings. These urban centers suggest a degree of organization and sophistication, yet their social and political structures are not fully understood. Ancient inscriptions indicate a form of democracy or confederation in certain cities, a rarity in the ancient world, but the specifics remain murky. How did the Lycians maintain cohesion across their rugged, fragmented terrain? What systems of communication and governance allowed them to survive for centuries in such a challenging environment? We have fragments of the story, yet the narrative is far from complete. One of the most striking features of Lycian culture is their tomb architecture. The tombs, carved directly into cliff faces, often resemble miniature temples or houses, some even featuring intricate reliefs depicting scenes of daily life, myth, or warfare. Unlike the monumental pyramids of Egypt, which celebrate the grandeur of kings, Lycian tombs appear more personal, more intimate, a reflection perhaps of a culture that revered family lineage or community ties as much as hierarchical power. Yet, many aspects of these carvings remain enigmatic. Why did some tombs feature figures of warriors or animals? Were they symbolic guardians of the afterlife or representations of achievements and status in life? The ambiguity invites speculation but offers no definitive explanation. The Lycian League, an ancient federation mentioned by classical sources, presents another puzzle. It is often cited as an early example of representative democracy, with cities sending delegates to a central council. Yet the records are sparse, leaving historians to reconstruct governance largely from inscriptions and the layout of urban centers. How much autonomy did individual cities truly have, and how were disputes resolved among these often isolated mountain communities? The answers remain tentative, drawn from piecemeal evidence and careful inference. Trade and interaction add further layers of mystery. Archaeological findings reveal Lycian pottery, jewelry, and imported goods that suggest extensive connections with neighboring civilizations, including Greeks, Persians, and later Romans. Did the Lycians act as intermediaries between these larger powers, or did they maintain independence through shrewd diplomacy and adaptation to their rugged terrain? Their ability to thrive in such a contested and dynamic region raises questions about their resilience and ingenuity. Yet despite their apparent sophistication, the Lycians eventually fade from prominence. By the time the Roman Empire extended its influence across Anatolia, Lycian cities had largely been absorbed, and their distinct cultural identity became intertwined with, and sometimes overshadowed by, imperial structures. The reasons for this transition remain partly speculative. Did external conquest hasten their assimilation, or did economic and social pressures lead to a gradual integration? And what elements of Lycian society, their language, rituals, and unique funerary practices persisted in ways we have yet to fully recognize? The material culture of Lycia continues to raise fascinating questions. Inscriptions hint at myths, legal codes, and political arrangements that could illuminate the inner workings of their society. Yet much of this knowledge is fragmentary. The tomb reliefs and architectural motifs suggest a blend of local traditions and external influences, reflecting both adaptation and distinct identity. How did the Lycians reconcile these pressures, maintaining a unique culture while engaging with powerful neighbors? And what might have been lost to the relentless passage of time, buried beneath centuries of sediment and human activity? Walking among the Lycian ruins today, the cliffs, tombs, and scattered city foundations carry an eerie quiet. The wind across the mountains seems to whisper stories of resilience, artistry, and human ambition, yet the full narrative remains tantalizingly incomplete. For every insight we gain through archaeology, there is a shadow of uncertainty, a question mark that reminds us how much remains hidden. The Lycians, like the Nok or the Indus Valley Civilization before them, challenge our assumptions about historical memory. That even a people with remarkable achievements, skilled artisanship, and complex social structures can leave behind mysteries that endure for millennia. So, as we trace the winding paths of Lycian settlements and gaze upon tombs carved high into the cliffs, we are left with a lingering question. What else might this rugged land conceal? What aspects of Lycian life, belief, and governance remain veiled beneath layers of earth and centuries of silence? And how much of their story will continue to elude us, revealing itself only in fragments, waiting for future generations to piece together the puzzle? The Lycians remind us, once again, that history is not only the story of what is known, it is also the haunting, silent space of what is yet to be discovered. As the echoes of cliffside tombs and Lycian cities fade behind us, our journey now turns southward, deep into the fertile plains and rugged hills of what is today Balochistan, Pakistan. Here, near the banks of the Bolan and Kachi rivers, lie the earliest traces of human settlement in South Asia, the ancient site of Mehrgarh. The landscape is both harsh and generous. Arid stretches broken by intermittent rivers where early farmers and herders tamed the land, coaxing crops and animals from the soil in a delicate balance with nature. The sun bleaches the ruins, casting long shadows across the remnants of mud brick dwellings, hearths, and granaries, whispering stories of a people who lived, worked, and dreamed here over 9,000 years ago. Mehrgarh is often celebrated as a cradle of early civilization, a precursor to the Indus Valley cities that would rise centuries later. Excavations reveal a society capable of remarkable innovation: the domestication of wheat, barley, and cattle, sophisticated pottery adorned with intricate geometric designs, and early copper tools that hint at emerging metallurgy. But for all the evidence of human ingenuity, the site retains an air of mystery. How did these people organize themselves socially? What belief systems guided their rituals and daily practices? Archaeologists can reconstruct their diet, their tools, even the layout of their homes. Yet the inner world of Mehrgarh, their stories, their songs, their fears, remains tantalizingly out of reach. Perhaps the most compelling artifacts are the terracotta figurines and decorative ornaments uncovered across the site. Some depict humans with exaggerated features, others animals in poses of striking realism. Were these objects devotional, symbolic, or simply artistic expressions? The lack of written records from this early period leaves interpretation open, and the answers are elusive. Every discovery adds a fragment to the puzzle, yet the full picture remains veiled, a whisper of culture preserved in clay and stone. Mehrgarh also fascinates for its role as a bridge between the Neolithic and the Bronze Age. Over centuries, the settlement shows a gradual sophistication in technology and social organization. Early phases reveal simple mud brick homes and communal living spaces, while later phases indicate the emergence of specialized crafts, long-distance trade, and more complex community structures. This progression suggests not only adaptation and resilience, but also the ability to innovate across generations. Yet, despite this apparent trajectory toward complexity, the city eventually fades from prominence, giving way to the great urban centers of the Indus Valley. What prompted this transition? Did environmental changes, shifting rivers, or resource depletion drive the population elsewhere? Or did the knowledge and skills of Mehrgarh simply diffuse into neighboring regions, leaving the original settlement to recede quietly into history? The location of Mehrgarh itself hints at both opportunity and vulnerability. Nestled between river valleys yet within reach of the harsh surrounding mountains, it offered fertile land for cultivation but demanded careful adaptation to a volatile climate. Some researchers suggest that climatic shifts, changes in monsoon patterns, or prolonged droughts may have influenced settlement patterns, nudging populations toward the emerging Indus cities. Others speculate about social or technological factors. As communities grew and developed, did they migrate to exploit new resources, trade networks, or political alliances? Each theory is plausible, yet the archaeological record preserves only fragments, leaving much to interpretation and wonder. Evidence of burial practices further deepens the mystery. Mehrgarh graves often contain beads, ornaments, and pottery, suggesting a belief in an afterlife or the importance of status in death. The careful placement of these items reveals reverence, ritual, and perhaps a sense of continuity beyond life. But why were certain items chosen, and what did they signify? Did these practices evolve over time, reflecting shifts in belief, power, or social hierarchy? and what aspects of their spiritual or cultural life left no trace at all, swallowed by the millennia. Trade and interaction add another layer of intrigue. Artifacts from Mehrgarh indicate connections, direct or indirect, with distant regions, including the Iranian Plateau and Mesopotamia. These links hint at a network of exchange, ideas, and influence, suggesting that even in its early phases, the settlement was part of a broader human story. Yet, exactly how these networks functioned remains a puzzle. What goods were traded, and how did knowledge of metallurgy, agriculture, and craft spread across such distances? And to what extent did these interactions shape the trajectory of the civilization, both culturally and technologically? In contemplating Mehrgarh, we are confronted with the paradox of ancient life. Evidence of remarkable sophistication exists alongside profound silence. The settlement offers glimpses of daily routines, economic strategies, and artistic achievement, yet the people themselves remain almost invisible. Their voices are present only in the objects they left behind, their intentions inferred from patterns rather than declared in words. And it is precisely this combination of clarity and ambiguity that makes Mehrgarh so compelling, a civilization whose contributions are foundational, yet whose inner life remains largely unknown. Walking among the ruins today, one can imagine the rhythms of life that once animated these mud-brick streets. Children tending animals, artisans shaping clay into vessels, farmers planting seeds in carefully irrigated plots, the mundane and the sacred interwoven into daily existence. And yet, the city eventually falls silent, leaving only whispers in clay, copper, and bone. What drove the community to abandon or transform its settlement? Were environmental pressures, societal evolution, or broader migratory trends responsible? Or did something entirely unforeseen shape the fate of this early civilization? Mehrgarh reminds us that the story of humanity is rarely linear or complete. It is composed of fragments, shifts, and transitions, each layer offering insight while simultaneously posing new questions. As we study the artifacts, the burials, and the traces of daily life, we are invited to wonder not just about the people who lived here, but about the mysteries that lie beneath the soil, yet to be unearthed. What more might this ancient settlement reveal if future excavations push deeper, or if new methods of analysis unlock hidden patterns? And how many other early civilizations, like Mehrgarh, shaped the world in ways we can only begin to imagine, leaving behind tantalizing traces of knowledge, innovation, and human resilience? From the sun-baked plains of Mehrgarh, where early farmers shaped the foundations of human civilization, we travel westward across continents and centuries, arriving in the rolling hills of central Italy. Here, among verdant valleys and ancient rivers, lay the heartland of the Etruscans, a civilization whose influence shaped the earliest foundations of Rome, yet whose origins and eventual disappearance remain shrouded in mystery. The landscape is dotted with tombs hewn from rock, hilltop settlements, and temples that speak silently of a people both sophisticated and elusive. Sunlight casts long shadows across terracotta roofs and carved stone, revealing glimpses of a world at once familiar and enigmatic. The Etruscans flourished between roughly the 8th and 3rd centuries BCE, leaving behind cities such as Tarquinia, Veii, and Cerveteri. Excavations of these sites reveal a culture rich in artistry, commerce, and ritual. Their tombs, often elaborately decorated with frescoes and reliefs, depict banquets, religious ceremonies, and daily life in astonishing detail. Here, the dead were celebrated as much as the living were honored, reflecting a society deeply invested in the continuity between life and what comes after. But while their art speaks volumes, much about the Etruscans' social structures, language, and governance remains enigmatic. Their script, partially deciphered, provides clues, but no definitive answers, leaving historians to rely on indirect evidence and careful deduction. One of the most striking features of Etruscan civilization is the sophistication of its urban centers. Cities were carefully planned with streets, public spaces, and defensive walls. They engaged in trade across the Mediterranean, interacting with Greeks, Phoenicians, and later Romans, absorbing influences while maintaining a distinct identity. Their wealth is evident not only in material culture, bronze figurines, pottery, jewelry, but also in the complex political and religious systems that underpinned their society. Yet, despite these achievements, the origins of the Etruscans themselves are a subject of debate. Were they indigenous to the Italian peninsula, or did they migrate from across the sea, perhaps from Anatolia or the Aegean? Ancient historians offer conflicting accounts, and modern archaeology provides tantalizing evidence but no definitive resolution. The Etruscans' mastery of funerary art and ritual adds another layer to the mystery. Tombs carved into cliffs and hillsides often resemble homes, complete with furniture, frescoes, and symbolic objects meant to accompany the deceased into the afterlife. The frescoes are vivid, depicting feasts, dances, and religious rites, yet we are left to interpret their meaning through the lens of time. What did these ceremonies reveal about their beliefs, their conceptions of morality, or their understanding of life and death? And why did such an advanced civilization eventually fade, leaving Rome to inherit the peninsula almost as if the Etruscans had never existed? The Etruscan language itself offers both clues and frustration. Inscriptions appear on tombs, urns, and artifacts, revealing a vocabulary and grammar partially understood, yet leaving the vast majority of texts unintelligible. Their writing hints at rituals, names, and trade, but it rarely unveils the broader philosophical, political, or literary achievements of the culture. How did they govern themselves? What stories did they tell about their past and their gods? Much of this world remains locked away, readable only in fragments and tantalizing suggestions. Trade and diplomacy were central to Etruscan life. Archaeological evidence shows that they exchanged goods and ideas with civilizations across the Mediterranean, adopting Greek motifs in pottery, Phoenician influences in metallurgy, and perhaps even early alphabetic systems. Yet, while the Etruscans were culturally receptive, they maintained distinctive artistic and religious traditions that set them apart from their neighbors. What factors allowed them to preserve this identity for centuries? And how did the growing power of Rome ultimately erode their autonomy, culture, and memory? The decline of the Etruscans is as enigmatic as their rise. By the 3rd century BCE, their cities had been absorbed into the expanding Roman Republic, and their language and many of their customs gradually disappeared. Yet, traces of their influence persist in Roman architecture, religious rites, and social structures. Could it be that they were not erased entirely but subtly integrated into one of history's most influential civilizations? And if so, what elements of Etruscan thought, religion, and artistry remain hidden in plain sight, woven into the fabric of Roman and ultimately Western civilization? Walking among the remnants of Etruscan tombs and cities today, one can almost hear the echoes of a vibrant society, the clatter of bronze tools, the chatter of markets, the ceremonial chants of sacred rites. Yet the people themselves remain silent, their voices heard only through the objects they left behind and the faint traces of their language. Each artifact, each tomb, is a fragment of a story that resists full reconstruction, leaving historians and observers alike to speculate, to wonder, and to imagine. The Etruscans, much like Mehrgarh, the Lycians, or the Nok, remind us that history is not always a clear chronicle of rise and fall. It is a mosaic of mysteries, gaps, and lingering questions. We can trace their achievements, appreciate their artistry, and infer aspects of daily life, yet we remain strangers to their full experience. What inspired their art, guided their politics, or shaped their rituals? And what might future discoveries reveal about a civilization that once thrived so vibrantly, only to fade into the shadows of history? In contemplating the Etruscans, we are confronted by the delicate interplay between what is known and what remains hidden. Their cities, tombs, and inscriptions offer glimpses of ingenuity, culture, and complexity, yet leave us with profound uncertainties. How many other voices from the ancient world remain muted, awaiting discovery or reinterpretation? And how much of our own understanding of history depends on the fragments left behind, whispering stories we can only partially hear? The Etruscans, silent yet persistent, continue to challenge our assumptions, urging us to look closer, think deeper, and embrace the mysteries that history preserves. As the sun sets behind the gentle hills of central Italy and the echoes of Etruscan tombs fade into memory, our journey now takes us far across oceans and continents to the arid coasts of northern Peru. Here, along the valleys of the Moche and Chicama rivers, rises the haunting remnants of the Moche Civilization, a society that flourished between approximately 100 and 800 CE. The land is rugged yet fertile, where desert sands meet irrigated fields, and where the vast Pacific whispers secrets to those who will listen. Across these valleys, pyramids of adobe rise like silent sentinels. The Huaca del Sol, the Huaca de la Luna, monuments to a culture whose power, ingenuity, and artistry remain both awe-inspiring and mysterious. The Moche were master architects and engineers. Their massive ceremonial pyramids, built from millions of adobe bricks, dominate the landscape, revealing not only technical skill, but also an extraordinary organizational capacity. Yet these structures are enigmatic. Unlike the uniform urban grids of other ancient civilizations, Moche sites appear more like monumental statements than living cities, suggesting a society deeply focused on ritual, hierarchy, and the assertion of authority. Who were the individuals commanding these monumental projects? What social or religious imperatives drove such immense labor? The evidence is fragmentary, and the questions linger, echoing through the centuries. Moche art offers another window into a complex civilization. Their ceramics, often vividly painted, depict scenes of daily life, warfare, religious ritual, and sometimes acts of violence that challenge modern sensibilities. Portrait vessels immortalize rulers, priests, and warriors, capturing remarkable detail in facial features, expressions, and attire. Yet while these artifacts reveal a society rich in symbolism and observation, they also raise perplexing questions. Why do some vessels depict elaborate ceremonies of sacrifice? Were these literal representations, allegorical or symbolic warnings? The absence of a decipherable written record leaves us interpreting images without the certainty of context. The Moche were skilled metallurgists and engineers, shaping gold, silver, and copper into intricate ornaments, masks, and ceremonial objects. They irrigated the desert, transforming harsh landscapes into productive agricultural zones, and cultivated maize, beans, and cotton to sustain large populations. Yet despite these clear signs of advanced knowledge, the civilization eventually collapsed, leaving much of its sophisticated society abandoned. Was it climate change, droughts, El Niño events, or shifting river patterns that undermined their agricultural base? Or did internal social conflict and political upheaval play a more decisive role? Perhaps it was a combination, a delicate balance of human and environmental factors that proved ultimately unsustainable. Burial sites provide glimpses into the lives of the elite and the social structure of the Moche. Tombs like that of the Lord of Sipon reveal lavish offerings, golden jewelry, ceremonial weapons, and intricate pottery, all carefully arranged to accompany the deceased. These graves suggest a complex hierarchy, with powerful individuals commanding resources and labor. Yet they also hint at spiritual or ritual significance that remains mysterious. What role did religion play in governance and daily life? Were these elite figures seen as intermediaries between humans and gods? And what of the common people, whose lives are harder to trace but whose labor sustained the society? The answers are tantalizingly incomplete. The Moche were intimately connected to their environment, both dependent on and challenged by it. The desert landscape offered protection from invaders but required careful management of water and crops. Archaeological evidence suggests they mastered irrigation systems, canals, and terracing, transforming arid valleys into productive centers. Yet the environment could be unforgiving. Paleoclimatic studies indicate that severe weather events may have repeatedly tested Moche resilience. How did they adapt to these challenges? And to what extent did environmental stress contribute to the sudden decline of this civilization? Trade and interaction with neighboring cultures also shaped Moche society. Artifacts reveal connections along the northern Peruvian coast and into the highlands, suggesting exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies. Yet these interactions remain only partially understood. Were the Moche expansionist, or did they maintain influence through cultural and religious prestige? And how did their relationships with neighboring groups influence the trajectory of their society, for both growth and collapse? In contemplating the Moche, one is struck by the interplay between human ambition and the unpredictability of nature. Their cities and pyramids speak of organization, skill, and vision, while their art and tombs reflect a deep engagement with spirituality, ritual, and social hierarchy. Yet for all their achievements, the civilization ultimately faded, leaving structures and artifacts that hint at extraordinary complexity, but reveal only fragments of the full story. What stories, beliefs, and innovations were lost with the decline of Moche society? And how much remains buried, either physically beneath the sands or hidden in interpretations we have yet to unlock? Walking through the ruins today, among towering pyramids and sun-bleached ceramic fragments, it is easy to imagine the pulse of life that once flowed here, the rhythms of labor, the solemnity of ceremony, the artistry of daily craft. And yet, for all the evidence of human creativity and adaptation, much remains unexplained. Why did the Moche rise so powerfully in this challenging landscape? And why did they fall with such seeming suddenness? The civilization, like so many others, offers a haunting reminder that the story of humanity is filled with both brilliance and fragility, achievement and disappearance. The Moche leave us with questions more than answers. How did they navigate the delicate balance between environmental mastery and spiritual devotion, social hierarchy and communal life? And what secrets of their society remain locked in tombs, pyramids, and artistic expressions waiting to be uncovered? As we trace their footprints across the northern Peruvian deserts, we are reminded that history is not a linear path but a mosaic of mysteries, each civilization leaving traces that both illuminate and confound, inviting us to look closer, think deeper, and wonder endlessly at the civilizations that time almost forgot. From the sun-scorched valleys of northern Peru, where the Moche once left their monumental pyramids and intricate art, our journey now ascends into the mist-shrouded cloud forests of the Andes. Here, amid precipitous cliffs, deep canyons, and dense vegetation, the Chachapoya people carved out a remarkable civilization, one that thrived between roughly 800 and 1538 CE. The landscape is dramatic and unforgiving. Steep mountains rise abruptly from river valleys, their peaks often hidden by swirling clouds, and the air carries a damp chill that seems to hold centuries of secrets. Within this rugged terrain lie the enigmatic stone citadels, burial sites, and settlements that hint at a culture both resilient and profoundly skilled. The Chachapoya, often called the warriors of the clouds, constructed settlements that appear to defy gravity itself. Sites such as Cuelap, massive stone fortresses perched atop sheer ridges, demonstrate a mastery of architecture and engineering that is astonishing given the isolation of the region. Thick walls, fortified gateways, and intricate circular dwellings suggest a society that was both communal and militarily vigilant, protecting itself from external threats. Yet the purpose and organization of these structures remain partially obscured. How did the Chachapoya coordinate such ambitious construction in such difficult terrain? And what social or spiritual principles guided the layout of their cities? The culture's funerary practices further deepen the mystery. The Chachapoya interred their dead in cliffside tombs and sarcophagi, often painted and decorated, overlooking the valleys below. Mummies have been discovered in remarkably preserved states, sometimes accompanied by ceremonial offerings. These practices suggest a profound reverence for ancestors and the afterlife. Yet the symbolic meaning of many artifacts remains elusive. Were these tombs designed to honor prominent individuals, or did they serve a larger communal or spiritual function? And how much do the positioning and construction of these burial sites reveal about Chachapoya cosmology, beliefs, and social hierarchy? Archaeological evidence points to a society that was both agriculturally adept and connected to broader Andean trade networks. Terraced fields, irrigation systems, and domesticated crops such as maize and potatoes demonstrate their capacity to sustain large populations in steep, challenging environments. At the same time, artifacts, including pottery, textiles, and tools, suggest exchanges with neighboring highland cultures. How extensive were these networks, and what role did trade play in maintaining the social and political structures of Chachapoya communities? The answers remain fragmentary, leaving much to careful interpretation. The Chachapoya were also skilled artisans. Their pottery, often adorned with geometric designs or anthropomorphic motifs, and their textiles, woven with intricate patterns and vibrant colors, reflect a society attentive to both utility and aesthetic expression. Yet, many of these objects are enigmatic in purpose. Did they carry symbolic or religious significance beyond their apparent functionality? And what aspects of their artistic expression might reveal hidden dimensions of Chachapoya life, now obscured by time? One of the most puzzling aspects of Chachapoya history is the civilization's sudden decline following the Inca conquest in the 15th century. Historical accounts describe resistance, deportation, and assimilation into the expanding Inca Empire. Yet much remains unclear about the full extent of cultural loss, survival, or transformation. How did the Chachapoya adapt to the pressures of conquest and integration? And how much of their knowledge, rituals, and social organization vanished in the aftermath, leaving only fragments for modern archaeologists to interpret? The region's geography both protected and isolated the Chachapoya. The steep mountains and dense forests provided natural defenses, allowing them to maintain a distinctive culture for centuries. Yet, the same isolation contributes to the mystery. The logistical challenges of communication, governance, and trade in such terrain are staggering. How did the Chachapoya maintain cohesion across dispersed settlements perched on cliff edges and hilltops? What methods of leadership, law, or ritual bound their communities together in this dramatic landscape? The evidence hints at complexity, but the full picture remains tantalizingly out of reach. Walking among the ruins today, the fog-laden cliffs and stone fortresses evoke a haunting sense of human endeavor against both nature and time. Circular dwellings, defensive walls, and cliffside tombs whisper stories of resilience, creativity, and adaptation. Yet the Chachapoya themselves remain silent, their voices preserved only in stone, pottery, and textiles. Every artifact, every structural remnant, is a fragment of a story we cannot fully reconstruct. What secrets do the cloud forests still conceal? How many tombs, settlements, and artifacts remain hidden beneath moss and mist, awaiting discovery? In contemplating the Chachapoya, we confront the delicate interplay between human achievement and historical obscurity. They remind us that civilization is not measured solely by written records or monumental urban centers. It is also found in ingenuity, adaptation, and the cultural imprints left upon even the most challenging landscapes. And yet, like the Moche before them, the Chachapoya vanished from prominence, leaving a legacy both tangible and elusive, a puzzle composed of stone walls, terraced fields, and silent tombs. As we trace the paths of their settlements and gaze across the foggy valleys below their fortresses, one is left to wonder, how did this remarkable people shape their world, and what forces led to their disappearance? What knowledge, ritual practices, and social innovations have been lost to time? And how much of their civilization still lies hidden, waiting for future generations to uncover and interpret? The Chachapoya, warriors of the clouds, continue to challenge our understanding of human history, standing as a testament to both ingenuity and mystery in the high Andes. From the mist-laden cloud forests of the Andes and the high cliff fortresses of the Chachapoya, our journey now carries us across continents and centuries to the arid plains of southern Turkmenistan. Here, amid the sun-scorched steppes and the seasonal shifts of the Mehrgarh River, lies the ancient settlement of Gonur Tepe, the largest city of the enigmatic Bactria Margiana Archaeological Complex, or BMAC. The landscape is stark, yet compelling. Endless horizons punctuated by low mounds of adobe and brick, where the wind carries both dust and whispers of human endeavor from nearly 4,000 years ago. It is a place that feels suspended in time, a crossroads of civilizations and a hub of ancient mystery. Gonur Tepe was first uncovered through painstaking excavation, revealing an extensive urban center with streets, fortifications, and monumental structures. Evidence suggests that it flourished between roughly 2,300 and 1,700 BCE, a period contemporaneous with early Mesopotamian, Indus, and Central Asian civilizations. The city's layout indicates deliberate planning. Defensive walls encircle complex administrative and ceremonial areas, while residential quarters suggest a society attuned to both communal life and hierarchy. Yet, despite the apparent sophistication, much about Gonur Tepe remains enigmatic. Who governed this sprawling city? What ideologies or belief systems guided the construction of its monumental buildings and ritual spaces? Perhaps the most compelling aspect of Gonur Tepe is its ritual architecture. The city contains massive temples and fire altars, some arranged around open courtyards, hinting at complex ceremonial practices. Bronze and copper artifacts, including ornate figurines and ritual implements, suggest a society with both spiritual sophistication and skilled craftsmanship. Yet the purpose of many of these objects and structures remains uncertain. Were they used to honor deities, mark seasonal cycles, or serve as spaces of communal authority? The lack of decipherable written records leaves these questions unanswered, inviting speculation and careful interpretation. Archaeologists have also uncovered burial mounds around the city, containing human remains alongside goods such as ceramics, jewelry, and metal tools. Some graves are singular, while others appear to be collective, hinting at social stratification or evolving funerary practices. What do these burials reveal about the people of Gonur Tepe, their beliefs about life and death, and their understanding of the cosmos? And how did their practices compare to contemporary civilizations across the broader region? Each discovery offers clues, yet the full social, spiritual, and political picture remains tantalizingly incomplete. The environmental context of Gonur Tepe adds to both its achievements and its mysteries. Situated near the Mehrgarh River, The city relied on sophisticated irrigation and agricultural techniques to sustain its population in an otherwise harsh, semi-arid landscape. Crops such as wheat, barley, and legumes were cultivated, while livestock roamed the surrounding plains. How did the city's planners manage such complex systems in a challenging environment? And could changes in climate or water supply have contributed to the eventual decline of this remarkable settlement? Trade and connectivity are equally intriguing. Artifacts recovered from Gonur Tepe suggest connections with distant regions: lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, carnelian beads from South Asia, and stylistic influences reminiscent of Mesopotamian craftsmanship. These finds indicate that Gonur Tepe was not isolated, but part of a network of cultural exchange, where ideas, goods, and technologies flowed across vast distances. How did this network function, and what role did Gonur Tepe play in shaping the flow of material and intellectual culture across Central Asia? Yet, despite its apparent prominence, the city eventually fell silent. By the early 2nd millennium BCE, Gonur Tepe and the broader BMAC sites were largely abandoned. The reasons for this decline remain speculative. Some scholars point to environmental pressures, shifting river courses, salinization of soil, or prolonged drought as possible triggers. Others suggest social or political upheaval, perhaps the migration of peoples or the rise of competing powers in the region. Or could it have been a combination of factors, a delicate tipping point that ended centuries of urban and cultural achievement? Walking among the mounds and excavated ruins today, one is struck by the scale of ambition and ingenuity. Massive walls, ceremonial structures, and scattered artifacts speak of a civilization that valued both order and ritual, community and hierarchy. Yet, for all the evidence of human skill, the people of Gonur Tepe themselves remain silent, leaving only the remnants of their endeavors to tell their story. What was daily life like in this ancient city? How did the inhabitants balance practical survival with spiritual and ceremonial obligations? And what knowledge, art, or practices vanished along with the city's decline, leaving us only fragments to piece together? In contemplating Gonur Tepe, we encounter a civilization that challenges our assumptions about the diffusion of urban culture and technological innovation. Here, in the harsh steppes of Central Asia, people built monumental cities, cultivated sophisticated agriculture, and maintained far-reaching trade connections, all without leaving the extensive textual records that characterize other ancient civilizations. What secrets might still lie buried beneath the sand and mud, awaiting discovery? How many insights into human ingenuity, resilience, and belief systems remain hidden, their stories interrupted by time and obscurity? Gonur Tepe reminds us that history is often a mosaic of glimpses and shadows. We can reconstruct streets, buildings, and artifacts, but the lifeblood of its people, their thoughts, choices, and motivations, remains largely unknown. It is a civilization that speaks to us in fragments, challenging us to listen closely, interpret cautiously, and wonder endlessly. And as we trace the outlines of its walls, temples, and tombs, we are left with the haunting question: what else might this city and the broader Bactria Margiana complex conceal beneath its silent mounds, waiting for the curious and patient to uncover? From the windswept steppes of Central Asia and the sun-bleached mounds of Gonur Tepe, our journey now carries us across oceans to the mountainous valleys of southern Mexico. Here, amidst the jagged peaks and fertile valleys of Oaxaca, lies the heartland of the Zapotec Civilization, a culture whose achievements in urban planning, architecture, and astronomy rival those of the most celebrated ancient societies. The landscape is dramatic. Steep mountains rise sharply from deep, winding valleys, and the air is often cool with mist, carrying the faint echoes of centuries past. It is among these rugged heights and fertile soils that the Zapotecs established Monte Alban, a city that would dominate the region for over a millennium and become a center of political and spiritual power. Monte Alban, perched on a flattened mountaintop overlooking the Oaxaca Valley, is an architectural marvel. Its terraces, pyramids, ball courts, and plazas suggest a carefully planned urban environment built to project both authority and spiritual resonance. The city's elevated position provided not only strategic oversight of the surrounding valleys, but also a symbolic connection between earth and sky, a recurring motif in Zapotec culture. Yet, despite the scale and sophistication of the site, many aspects of Zapotec society remain elusive. How were such massive projects coordinated? What rituals and hierarchies guided construction, governance, and daily life in a city that thrived in such challenging terrain? The Zapotecs were skilled artisans and innovators. Their pottery, carved stone monuments, and jewelry reveal an eye for detail, an understanding of symbolism, and technical mastery. Tombs discovered beneath Monte Alban contain elaborate grave goods, including intricately carved figurines, jade ornaments, and gold objects, all hinting at the spiritual and social importance of the individuals interred there. Yet these burials also raise profound questions. How were leaders chosen, and what determined their roles in both life and death? Were the ceremonies depicted in artifacts purely ritualistic, or did they reflect complex social and political structures that we have yet to fully understand? Writing and communication are among the most intriguing aspects of Zapotec culture. The Zapotec developed one of Mesoamerica's earliest writing systems, evident in inscriptions on monuments, tombs, and ritual objects. These symbols provide glimpses into calendrical cycles, genealogies, and perhaps legal or ceremonial records. But much of the script remains undeciphered, leaving large gaps in our understanding of their language, governance, and worldview. How did the Zapotec use written communication to organize their cities, codify rituals, or transmit knowledge across generations? And what wisdom, beliefs, or stories have been lost because the meanings of these symbols remain elusive? Trade and interaction were central to Zapotec life. Monte Alban's location allowed for control of the surrounding valleys and access to vital trade routes connecting the highlands, coasts, and distant Mesoamerican cultures. Artifacts suggest the movement of obsidian, ceramics, textiles, and other goods, indicating both economic sophistication and cultural exchange. How did the Zapotec maintain influence across such varied terrain? Were their interactions primarily commercial, or did they also include political and ceremonial alliances with neighboring cultures? These questions continue to challenge scholars and invite careful investigation. The city's decline, like the civilization itself, is shrouded in mystery. By the late 1st millennium CE, Monte Alban had largely been abandoned, and the Zapotec influence became more dispersed across smaller settlements in the region. What factors contributed to this transition? Was it environmental change, such as shifts in rainfall or soil fertility? Social unrest, internal political upheaval, or external pressures from rival societies? Or perhaps a combination of forces that gradually altered the social and political landscape, leaving the city silent yet not forgotten. Walking among the ruins today, the terraces, ball courts, and tombs evoke a society that balanced practical mastery with spiritual vision. The city's planners transformed the mountaintop into a center of ceremony, governance, and daily life, leaving a lasting imprint on the landscape. Yet the people themselves remain largely silent, speaking only through the artifacts and architecture they left behind. What did daily life feel like for those who lived here, worked the terraces, performed ritual dances, or navigated the political currents of Monte Alban? How much of their intellectual, spiritual, and cultural heritage was lost with the city's decline, and what might still be recoverable through careful study? The Zapotec Civilization reminds us that history is often a mixture of clarity and ambiguity. Their monumental architecture, sophisticated artistry, and early writing system offer tangible evidence of ingenuity, yet the gaps, Missing texts, undeciphered symbols, and unrecorded practices keep us aware of the limits of our knowledge. What remains hidden beneath the soil, within the archives of ritual objects, or in the silent contours of the surrounding mountains? How much can modern investigation uncover, and how much will remain a mystery, preserved in the whispers of time? In contemplating the Zapotecs, we are drawn to reflect on the fragility and resilience of human societies. They built cities that endured centuries, cultivated landscapes that sustained populations, and created cultural legacies that continue to inspire. And yet, like so many ancient civilizations, the Chachapoya, the Moche, Gonur Tepe, and countless others, their story is punctuated by uncertainty, inviting us to explore, imagine, and question. How many chapters of their history remain concealed, and how much of human ingenuity lies waiting, unseen, in the shadows of ancient cities, ready to be discovered? The Zapotecs, perched high in the mountains of Oaxaca, stand as a testament to the enduring human pursuit of knowledge, ritual, and artistry. Their legacy challenges us to look beyond the visible, to listen to the fragments of history, and to embrace the mysteries that remain, shaping our understanding of civilizations that time has left both revealed and hidden. From the sun-baked terraces of Oaxaca and the enigmatic Zapotec cities, our journey now crosses the Atlantic and returns to the heart of southern Africa, to the rolling hills and verdant valleys of modern-day Mpumalanga, South Africa. Here, nestled along the slopes and riverbanks near the town of Lydenburg, archaeologists uncovered the remnants of a remarkable Iron Age culture, one that thrived between approximately 500 and 1000 CE. The landscape is lush yet rugged, where rivers carve their paths through rocky terrain and dense foliage conceals the subtle traces of human settlement. Walking through these hills today, one can almost imagine the faint echoes of daily life carried on the wind. An ancient civilization that lived, labored, and expressed itself in ways both tangible and mysterious. The Lydenburg culture is best known for its distinctive pottery, some of the earliest and most intricately decorated ceramics in southern Africa. These vessels, often adorned with geometric patterns, incised lines, and symbolic motifs, reveal a society attentive to both aesthetics and ritual. The precision and style of these works suggest skilled artisanship, but the meaning behind the decorations remains elusive. Were these patterns purely decorative, or did they convey social status, spiritual beliefs, or coded messages understood only within the community? Each shard of pottery recovered is a whisper from the past, hinting at a complex worldview that we can only partially reconstruct. Beyond ceramics, the Lydenburg culture left traces of settlements and daily life that suggest a sophisticated adaptation to the environment. Iron tools, evidence of crop cultivation, and livestock remains indicate a society capable of sustaining itself through both agriculture and pastoralism. How did they organize their communities to manage resources and labor in a landscape of hills, rivers, and forests? And what strategies allowed them to thrive over centuries in this dynamic environment, balancing subsistence with the demands of social cohesion and ritual life? Burial practices offer further glimpses into the Lydenburg worldview. Archaeologists have uncovered graves containing pottery, beads, and other offerings, suggesting a belief system that honored the dead and possibly connected them to the living through ritual observances. The arrangement of these graves, their contents, and the care with which they were prepared hint at hierarchical or spiritual structures that remain largely mysterious. What did these ceremonies signify to the people themselves, and how did they reflect broader notions of identity, community, and cosmology? The artifacts provide tantalizing clues, but the full spectrum of belief and meaning remains hidden. Lydenburg settlements also demonstrate a keen understanding of materials and technology. Iron smelting and tool production were practiced locally, reflecting knowledge of metallurgy that supported both daily life and possibly broader trade networks. Yet the extent of these networks remains uncertain. Did the Lydenburg people exchange goods, ideas, or cultural practices with distant communities, or did their society develop largely in isolation, evolving unique solutions to local challenges? The evidence is fragmentary, leaving us to speculate about the social and economic connections of this enigmatic civilization. The cultural artifacts from Lydenburg reveal a society deeply invested in identity and expression. Figurines, though rare, suggest symbolic or ritual significance, possibly connected to fertility, ancestry, or spiritual beliefs. These small, carefully crafted objects stand in contrast to the more utilitarian aspects of daily life, hinting at a duality between practical survival and spiritual or symbolic thought. What inspired these creations, and how were they integrated into the rhythms of community life? How much of the Lydenburg imagination remains forever beyond our reach, embedded in practices and meanings that left no written record? Despite its evident sophistication, the Lydenburg culture eventually transformed or faded, leaving its descendants to merge into subsequent Iron Age societies in southern Africa. The reasons for this transition remain unclear. Was it gradual migration, environmental pressures, social reorganization, or a combination of factors that reshaped the cultural landscape? And how much of the Lydenburg identity survived, quietly absorbed into new communities, their innovations and rituals carried forward in ways that are subtle yet persistent? Walking across the hills and riverbanks of the Lydenburg region today, one can sense both presence and absence, the marks of human ingenuity etched into pottery, the outlines of settlements, and the hidden depths of burials that continue to yield their secrets slowly to time. It is a landscape alive with the echoes of a culture that mastered its environment, expressed itself through artistry and ritual, and navigated the challenges of social organization and resource management with skill and subtlety. Yet, like many ancient civilizations, much about the Lydenburg people remains elusive, leaving historians and observers to piece together fragments and ask questions that may never be fully answered. In contemplating the Lydenburg culture, we are reminded that the human story is rarely complete. Civilizations rise, adapt, and sometimes fade, leaving tangible traces that suggest complexity but never fully reveal the lived experience of those who created them. How did the Lydenburg people perceive the world around them? What knowledge, stories, and beliefs were carried through generations and which were lost to time? And how much of their ingenuity, resilience, and artistry still lies hidden beneath the soil, waiting to be uncovered by future generations? The Lydenburg culture, quietly nestled in the hills of Mpumalanga, stands as a testament to human creativity and adaptability. Their pottery, settlements, and ritual practices challenge us to think beyond the familiar, to consider the vast array of human experiences preserved only in fragments, and to embrace the mysteries that endure. And as we trace their traces across the landscape, we are left with a profound question. How many other stories of human endeavor, ingenuity, and subtle brilliance lie hidden, waiting for the patient observer to uncover them, just as the Lydenburg culture continues to do for us today? From the rolling hills of Mpumalanga and the enduring traces of the Lydenburg culture, our journey now takes us across continents and oceans, to the sun-baked plains of the Indian subcontinent. Here, in the western reaches of modern-day Gujarat, lies the ancient port city of Lothal, a vital center of the Indus Valley Civilization, sometimes called the Kingdom of Lothal. The landscape is a subtle mix of arid plains and fertile riverbanks, where the now dry channels of the Sabarmati and Bogavo rivers once brought the lifeblood of trade and commerce to the city's bustling docks. The remnants of stone platforms, brick streets, and warehouses hint at a sophisticated urban center, yet the story of Lothal remains shrouded in both sand and time. Lothal's most striking feature is its dockyard, one of the earliest known in the world. Carved with precision from baked bricks, it connected the city to inland trade routes and, through estuarine channels, to distant civilizations along the Arabian Sea. The dockyard suggests an advanced understanding of hydraulics and maritime engineering, a mastery of tides, currents, and seasonal fluctuations. Yet, despite the clarity of its construction, many questions linger. Who designed this monumental structure? How did the inhabitants manage trade, taxation, and regulation on such a large scale? And what goods passed through these waters, connecting Lothal to Mesopotamia, Persia, and beyond? Artifacts recovered from the city reveal a people deeply skilled in craft and industry. Beads of carnelian, agate, and semi-precious stones, along with exquisitely shaped pottery, copper tools, and seals, suggest a thriving economy and an eye for artistry. Some seals depict animals, mythical creatures, or intricate symbols whose exact meanings remain elusive, hinting at complex communication, belief systems, or commercial protocols. Were these symbols a form of early writing, a bureaucratic code, or purely symbolic representations tied to trade and identity? The absence of a fully deciphered script leaves these questions open, inviting speculation and careful interpretation. The urban planning of Lothal is equally remarkable. Streets were laid out in precise grids, residential quarters were systematically organized, and public structures, including warehouses and possibly administrative buildings, indicate coordinated civic planning. How did the rulers or city planners maintain such order? What systems of governance, law, or social organization enabled Lothal to thrive as a trade hub amidst the broader Indus network? And what roles did ritual, religion, or cultural practice play in guiding the rhythms of daily life? These questions linger, obscured by time but hinted at in the city's carefully constructed form. Trade was the lifeblood of Lothal. Archaeological evidence indicates connections to distant regions. Beads and jewelry suggest links with Afghanistan and Rajasthan, while seals and pottery reveal ties with Mesopotamia. Yet the mechanics of this exchange remain partially mysterious. How were merchants, artisans, and farmers coordinated across such distances? What influence did foreign trade have on local governance, culture, or technological innovation? And did the city act as an autonomous center of power, or was it integrated into a larger system of regional governance within the Indus Valley civilization? The decline of Lothal adds another layer of intrigue. By the late 2nd millennium BCE, the port and city were largely abandoned, leaving behind ruins that suggest a sudden or gradual transformation. Was this due to changes in river courses, silting of the dockyard, or environmental shifts that made the harbor unusable? Could social upheaval, economic disruption, or shifts in trade networks have accelerated the city's fall? Or did Lothal slowly lose its prominence as commerce shifted to other emerging centers along the Indus and beyond? The archaeological record provides clues but no definitive answers, leaving us with the sense of a civilization both sophisticated and vulnerable. Burial and ritual evidence, though limited, hints at a people attentive to ceremony and perhaps spiritual observance. Human remains found with ornaments and ceremonial objects suggest practices that honored social hierarchy or community cohesion. How did these rituals reflect the beliefs and values of Lothal's inhabitants? And what broader cosmologies, ethical codes, or societal norms guided life in a city so closely tied to trade, craftsmanship, and the rhythms of the river? Walking among the brick foundations, platforms, and scattered artifacts today, one can almost feel the pulse of Lothal at its height. The clatter of workshops, the bargaining of merchants, the rhythmic lapping of water against the dock, and the hum of civic life carefully ordered across streets and quarters. Yet, for all its sophistication, the city speaks only in fragments. Its people are silent, their thoughts, motivations, and daily lives preserved in clay, brick, and metal, waiting to be interpreted. How did they perceive their place in the world? what inspired their engineering, their artistry, and their commerce, and what knowledge, once vital to their survival, vanished along with the city itself. Lothal, like many ancient civilizations we have explored, illustrates the delicate interplay between human ingenuity and environmental vulnerability. Its precise urban planning, monumental dockyard, and vibrant trade networks reflect remarkable adaptation and vision, while its abandonment reminds us of the fragility of even the most sophisticated societies. What further secrets lie beneath the sands, the dried riverbeds, or the layers of brick and mortar yet to be uncovered? How much of Lothal's story, its commerce, its innovation, and its culture, remains hidden from view, awaiting discovery by future generations? In contemplating the kingdom of Lothal, we confront a civilization that bridges practical mastery and mystery, leaving behind both evidence of remarkable achievement and the persistent enigma of its ultimate fate. It challenges us to consider how human endeavor interacts with environment, trade, and society, and how much of history remains to be pieced together from fragments left behind. And as we trace the remains of streets, docks, and workshops, we are reminded that even thousands of years later, Lothal continues to whisper its story, inviting us to listen, to wonder, and to explore what lies beneath the surface of time. As the first light of dawn stretches across the highlands of central Mexico, the remnants of a once mighty city begin to emerge from the mist. Towering above the placid waters of Lake Texcoco, the jagged foundations of temples and plazas hint at a civilization that flourished with astonishing complexity. Tenochtitlan, the heart of the Aztec Empire, was more than a city. It was a testament to human ingenuity, a marvel of engineering, urban planning, and spiritual devotion. Canals carved like veins across the island, causeways stretching over the lake, and floating gardens, chinampas, that fed tens of thousands of inhabitants, reveal a society finely tuned to its environment. Yet, beneath the beauty and precision lies a story threaded with questions that have lingered for centuries. We know much about the Aztecs from the codices, early Spanish accounts, and archaeological excavations, yet these records tell only part of the story. The Mexica people, as they called themselves, rose from relative obscurity in the 14th century to dominate vast regions of Mesoamerica. Their empire was built on a combination of military prowess, intricate trade networks, and an astonishingly sophisticated system of tribute and governance. Temples dedicated to gods such as Huitzilopochtli and Tlaloc towered above the city, while markets bustled with obsidian knives, cacao beans, and colorful textiles. Rituals and ceremonies were interwoven with daily life, and the calendar guided not only agriculture, but the rhythm of political and religious events. Yet, even within this well-documented civilization, mysteries abound. The scale and precision of Tenochtitlan itself raise questions that continue to puzzle historians. How did the Aztecs construct massive causeways and canals with such accuracy and engineering skill on an island surrounded by shifting waters? How did they create chinampas that remained fertile and productive for generations, seemingly defying the natural limits of agriculture? Some scholars argue that this ingenuity reflects a deep, intimate understanding of hydrology and ecology, yet the exact methods, now largely lost, remain elusive. And then there is the question of the empire's sudden collapse. By 1521, less than a century after its rise to prominence, Tenochtitlan had fallen to the Spanish conquistadors. Hernán Cortés's accounts speak of superior weapons, alliances with rival city-states, and the devastating impact of smallpox. These explanations, while compelling, cannot fully account for the speed and totality of the empire's downfall. How could a society so resilient, so intricately organized, unravel so quickly under external pressures? Was it merely disease and war, or were there internal fractures, unrecorded uprisings, or other factors that contributed to the empire's demise. Artifacts offer tantalizing glimpses into these unanswered questions. Stone carvings depicting deities and mythic battles suggest a rich cosmology intertwined with real political power. Yet some codices contain symbols and narratives that remain undeciphered, hinting at knowledge or traditions that have vanished entirely. One wonders if certain rituals or forms of governance held secrets lost to the centuries, leaving behind only fragments open to interpretation. Why did some ceremonial practices disappear entirely, while others persisted, reshaped under colonial influence? And how much of the Aztec worldview, its conception of the cosmos, its understanding of life and death, remains hidden behind the layers of conquest and cultural assimilation? Speculation and fringe theories naturally arise from these gaps. Some researchers suggest that astronomical knowledge embedded in Aztec architecture was far more advanced than commonly acknowledged. Temples were aligned with celestial events. Causeways and plazas may have mirrored constellations. Could the Aztecs have possessed an observational astronomy that rivaled even European practices centuries later? Others point to the possibility that their calendar, often reduced in popular imagination to the end-of-the-world myths, encoded cycles of knowledge about agriculture, politics, and human behavior in ways we are only beginning to understand. Beyond architecture and codices, the very landscape seems to hold secrets. Lake Texcoco, now largely drained, once preserved the city's skeletal traces beneath its waters. Modern excavations occasionally reveal skeletons, ceremonial objects, or fragments of stone temples, prompting questions about the rituals conducted at the city's peripheries. Were some practices deliberately hidden, buried as part of sacred observances, or lost in the upheaval of conquest? And if so, what knowledge or traditions might still lie buried, waiting to be rediscovered by future archaeologists beneath layers of silt and sediment? Even today, the legacy of the Aztecs continues to evoke wonder and unease. The city of Mexico now sprawls across what was once a shimmering lake, the ancient stones submerged beneath urban streets. Yet, remnants of Tenochtitlan, temple platforms, the Templo Mayor, and countless artifacts emerge intermittently as if the past refuses to be forgotten. Each excavation reveals more questions than answers, hinting at an empire whose depth we are only beginning to appreciate. What remains most compelling, perhaps, is the tension between what is known and what is unknowable. We have records, artifacts, and ruins, yet we will never fully experience the daily life of a Tenochtitlan citizen, the exact sound of their marketplaces, the nuance of their prayers to gods who no longer speak. The Aztec Empire's disappearance is not just a historical event, it is an enduring mystery, an echo of human achievement shadowed by loss. How much of their understanding of the world vanished with the city, and how many truths coded in stone and memory remain just out of reach? As we step back from the ruins, the calm of the lake mingling with the bustle of modern Mexico City, we are reminded that some civilizations leave behind more questions than answers. Tenochtitlan stands as a testament to human ambition and ingenuity, but also to the fragility of even the greatest empires. The Aztec story, like the gentle mist over Lake Texcoco at dawn, is both vivid and elusive, inviting us to look closer, to wonder, and to imagine what might still lie hidden beneath the surface, silent, mysterious, and waiting. Yes. From the shimmering Aegean Sea, the island of Crete rises like a jewel, its rugged cliffs and sun-washed valleys holding the remnants of a civilization both brilliant and enigmatic. Perched on these ancient shores, the sprawling palace of Knossos emerges from the mind's eye, a labyrinth of corridors, frescoed walls, and colossal columns painted in reds and blues that have endured for millennia. Even today, standing amidst the ruins, one can sense the pulse of a society that thrived thousands of years ago, its sophistication remarkable, yet shadowed by mysteries that continue to puzzle archaeologists and historians alike. The Minoans, named after the legendary King Minos, flourished on Crete from approximately 2700 to 1450 BCE. Their influence radiated across the Aegean and even into the eastern Mediterranean, evidenced by trade networks that stretched to Egypt, Anatolia, and the Cyclades. At Knossos, one can almost hear the echoes of ceremonial processions, the clatter of artisans in workshops, and the vibrant chatter of markets teeming with goods. Finely crafted pottery, intricate jewelry, and vividly colored textiles. Frescoes depicting bull-leaping athletes, dancers, and marine life hint at a culture deeply connected to ritual, nature, and possibly even the divine. Yet, for all their apparent brilliance, so much about the Minoans remains shrouded in uncertainty. Their writing systems, Linear A and the later Linear B, pose one of the earliest puzzles of the ancient world. Linear B, deciphered in the mid-20th century, revealed an administrative language for Mycenaean Greeks, yet Linear A, used exclusively by the Minoans, remains largely indecipherable. Could there be knowledge encoded in these symbols that we have yet to uncover? Was it merely an administrative tool, or did it also carry spiritual or cultural dimensions, now lost to time? Their sudden decline, too, fuels debate. Around 1450 BCE, the palaces of Crete suffered widespread destruction. Archaeological evidence points to fire and structural collapse, yet the causes remain contested. Was it the eruption of the Thera volcano, modern-day Santorini, that sent tsunamis and ash clouds sweeping across the island, disrupting agriculture and trade? Or were there internal upheavals, perhaps social unrest, invasions, or shifts in economic power? Some theories suggest a combination of natural disaster and human conflict, leaving only fragments of what had been a flourishing civilization. The Minoans' apparent lack of fortifications also raises intriguing questions. Unlike many contemporary societies that constructed massive defensive walls, Minoan palaces appear open and accessible. Does this suggest a society confident in its peace and prosperity, or one whose security rested on alliances and naval strength? And if so, how did they respond when that security was threatened by forces both seen and unseen? Artifacts scattered across the island offer glimpses into daily life, yet they also deepen the mystery. The intricacy of Minoan pottery, the elegance of their jewelry, and the delicacy of frescoed figures all speak of a society highly skilled in craftsmanship. But why did they abandon certain sites so completely? What beliefs or rituals led them to leave palaces that seem built for longevity? Some researchers propose that religious shifts, possibly involving the veneration of the bull or goddess figures, may have played a role in social restructuring, or even the erasure of entire ceremonial spaces. Maritime prowess was clearly central to Minoan identity. Ships depicted in frescoes, alongside anchors and harbors excavated at coastal settlements, reveal a people who traded far beyond their island home. Yet, traces of their contacts suggest not only commerce but cultural exchange that might hint at shared knowledge, technologies, and ideas we scarcely understand today. Could some Minoan innovations have traveled silently across the Mediterranean, leaving influences in distant cultures while the source itself faded into obscurity? The artistry of the Minoans is equally captivating and puzzling. Bull-leaping frescoes, for example, suggest rituals both athletic and spiritual, yet their exact meaning eludes modern interpretation. Were these events religious ceremonies, rites of passage, or symbolic reenactments of myth? And why do depictions of women appear prominently, often in positions of power or ceremonial authority? Does this hint at a society with social structures radically different from contemporary civilizations? The answers remain speculative, tantalizingly out of reach. Even the island's geography adds to the sense of mystery. Crete's mountains, gorges, and caves provided natural refuges, yet settlements often clustered around palaces and coastal towns. Were some communities hidden deliberately, or were they abandoned as environmental conditions shifted, leaving traces only in scattered pottery shards and foundations? And what of the objects buried in those caves? Ritual deposits, votive offerings, perhaps even records or knowledge deliberately hidden from posterity. Over time, Minoan influence waned, absorbed by the rising Mycenaean culture from mainland Greece. Yet, vestiges of Minoan art, architecture, and myth, such as the enduring legend of the Minotaur and Labyrinth, persist, hinting at a legacy both tangible and elusive. As modern archaeologists walk the worn stones of Knossos or sift through clay tablets in storerooms, they are confronted with a civilization that thrived with sophistication, yet vanished almost entirely from the historical record. How much of their worldview, their knowledge of the sea, of ritual, of governance, has been irrevocably lost? Perhaps the greatest mystery lies in the tension between presence and absence. We see the palaces, the frescoes, the vessels, and the artifacts. They speak of life, ritual, and culture, but the voices behind them are silent. The Minoans left no continuous narrative, no descendant society to recount their stories in living memory. We are left with fragments, shadows of a civilization that once radiated across the Aegean, inviting us to imagine their festivals, their ceremonies, and their daily lives. As the sun sets over Crete, painting the ancient stones in a warm, amber glow, one cannot help but reflect on the ephemeral nature of human achievement. The Minoans constructed cities, artworks, and rituals of profound complexity, yet time has concealed their secrets beneath layers of earth, ash, and silence. What truths remain hidden, waiting for discovery in forgotten tombs or sealed chambers? And how much of the Minoan legacy persists in subtle echoes, in myths, symbols, or architectural motifs scattered across the ancient Mediterranean? The story of the Minoans, like the shifting shadows of Knossos at dusk, invites contemplation, urging us to wonder, to question, and to look deeper. Their civilization, brilliant yet enigmatic, reminds us that history is often a puzzle with pieces missing, a labyrinth of human endeavor whose full shape may never be known, yet whose mysteries continue to captivate those who seek to understand. Along the gentle curves of southern Iberia, where the Guadalquivir River snakes its way toward the Atlantic, one can almost sense the whisper of a lost civilization beneath the sun-baked plains and fertile marshlands. Here, in what is now modern Andalusia, the Tartessos once thrived, a society both alluring and enigmatic, whose name resonates faintly through the echoes of Greek and Roman accounts, but whose traces in the soil and riverbeds remain tantalizingly sparse. Standing beside the river today, the soft lapping of water against reeds and stone evokes visions of bustling ports, copper workshops, and marketplaces alive with traders from distant lands. Yet, despite the landscape's quiet serenity, it holds stories that have long resisted full understanding. Tartessos, historians suggest, flourished between the 9th and 6th centuries BCE, occupying a region rich in metals, particularly gold, silver, and copper. These resources, alongside fertile agricultural lands, made the civilization a natural center of trade and wealth. Greek historians like Herodotus wrote of Tartessos with fascination, describing a prosperous kingdom ruled by kings of legendary renown, a place where commerce and culture intermingled with myth. But these written records, though intriguing, are fragile glimpses into a society largely vanished from the physical record. Archaeologists have discovered remnants of settlements, metallurgical workshops, and imported goods. Yet the exact locations of Tartessian cities remain uncertain, leaving scholars to piece together the puzzle from fragments scattered across the landscape. The civilization's apparent mastery of metallurgy stands out as one of its most compelling attributes. Artifacts unearthed along the Guadalquivir Valley, ornate jewelry, finely crafted weapons, and ritual objects reveal a people with a sophisticated understanding of metalwork. How did Tartessos acquire the techniques and materials to create such intricate objects? Was this knowledge shared through extensive trade networks reaching as far as the eastern Mediterranean, or did it emerge independently in Iberia's fertile river valleys? And why, if their technological prowess was so advanced, do we see so few lasting urban structures? Tartessos' written record, if it ever existed, is nearly invisible to us today. Inscriptions, symbols, and accounts are tantalizing but fragmentary, leaving interpretations speculative at best. Some scholars argue that Tartessian writing, still largely undeciphered, may hold keys to understanding social hierarchies, religious practices, and even the rhythms of trade. Could hidden scripts or forgotten tablets lie buried beneath silt and riverbanks, preserving knowledge of a civilization that thrived yet vanished almost entirely from human memory? Their sudden disappearance adds to the enduring intrigue. By the 6th century BCE, Tartessos seems to fade from historical accounts, leaving only shadowy references in Greek and Roman texts. Some suggest that the kingdom was absorbed into emerging Iberian tribes or overwhelmed by migrations and invasions, while others point to environmental changes, rising sea levels, river shifts, or floods as contributing factors. Was it human conflict, climate, or a combination that brought about their decline? And why is there no singular catastrophic event recorded? No story of a final battle or dramatic collapse, only silence? Trade, it seems, was at the heart of Tartessos' identity. The Greeks spoke of Tartessian wealth in gold and silver, and archaeological evidence suggests commerce with Phoenicians, Carthaginians, and even far-flung Mediterranean ports. Artifacts such as pottery, amphorae, and jewelry bear testimony to cultural exchange, hinting at connections between Tartessos and some of the most sophisticated maritime networks of the ancient world. Yet the very openness that enabled such trade may also have contributed to its downfall. How secure was a civilization so dependent on the flux of foreign markets, and did its wealth make it vulnerable to external ambitions or internal tensions? The cultural practices of Tartessos, though largely obscured, offer further mysteries. Greek accounts mention elaborate religious ceremonies, shrines adorned with offerings, and kings who were both political and spiritual leaders. But what deities did they worship, and how were these beliefs woven into daily life? Some scholars speculate that rituals may have involved sacred rivers or caves, locations now submerged or eroded beyond recognition. Could these sacred sites, hidden or destroyed, hold clues to the spiritual and societal structures of a civilization otherwise erased from history? Even the geographic setting carries enigmas. The delta of the Guadalquivir, once a fertile and navigable waterway, has shifted over millennia. Cities that may have thrived along its banks could now be buried beneath layers of sediment or lost to the encroaching marshes. And yet, scattered treasures, jewelry, tools, and fragments of architecture hint at a society of striking sophistication, a people whose understanding of commerce, craft, and diplomacy rivaled that of their contemporaries in the Eastern Mediterranean. Speculative theories occasionally emerge to fill the gaps in our understanding. Some suggest Tartessos may have been the inspiration for Atlantis myths or other legendary lost civilizations of the West. Others propose that the disappearance of Tartessos reflects a deliberate cultural transition absorbed into other Iberian identities, leaving only material traces of a kingdom that once dazzled its neighbors with wealth and sophistication. While these ideas remain unconfirmed, they serve to remind us that history is often incomplete, leaving space for imagination guided by evidence. As the sun sets over the Guadalquivir, casting long shadows across marsh and field, one is struck by the paradox of Tartessos, a civilization that shone brightly in its time, influencing trade, art, and culture, yet leaving behind tantalizingly little for us to study. What secrets remain hidden beneath river silt, forgotten cities, or in fragments of metalwork yet unearthed? And what might a more complete understanding of Tartessos reveal? Not just about the past of southern Iberia, but about the complex tapestry of human civilization across the Mediterranean world? The mystery endures. Tartessos, once famed for its wealth, artistry, and commerce, lingers in shadows and whispers, a civilization that beckons us to explore, question, and imagine. Perhaps one day, new discoveries will illuminate the details lost to time, yet for now, the civilization remains suspended between myth and history, leaving us to wonder what treasures, knowledge, and stories remain hidden beneath the sands and waters of Andalusia, patiently waiting for the curious to uncover them. High in the rugged peaks of the Andes, where clouds drift between jagged summits and the wind carries the faint scent of earth and stone, the remnants of a civilization long vanished cling to the mountainsides. Terraces stretch across steep slopes, rivers carve deep valleys below, and citadels of stone, most famously Machu Picchu, stand as silent witnesses to the ingenuity and vision of the Inca. The landscape itself seems to hum with the memory of a people who mastered these formidable heights, bending nature to their needs while respecting its dangers. It is here, amid shifting mists and sun-drenched ridges, that the story of the Inca unfolds, a narrative as breathtaking as it is enigmatic. The Inca Empire, or Tawantinsuyu, emerged in the early 13th century and, within less than 2 centuries, became the largest empire in pre-Columbian America. Stretching along the spine of South America from modern Ecuador to Chile, it encompassed diverse climates and cultures united under a centralized system of governance that coordinated agriculture, labor, and communication across vast and treacherous terrain. At the heart of this empire lay Cusco, a city designed with meticulous geometry and spiritual symbolism believed to represent the belly of the world itself. Roads wound across mountains, connecting distant provinces, and suspension bridges spanned rivers that threatened to isolate entire regions. The Inca were extraordinary engineers and planners. Agricultural terraces carved into cliffs allowed the cultivation of crops at altitudes that would challenge even modern farmers. Irrigation systems distributed water with precision, and storage facilities, kolkes, ensured that communities could survive lean seasons. Yet for all this sophistication, so much remains puzzling. How did the Inca coordinate such a vast empire without a written language, relying instead on quipu, knotted strings encoding numerical and perhaps symbolic information? Could these simple-looking devices have contained knowledge beyond record-keeping, encoding histories, genealogies, or even spiritual concepts that are now lost to us? Their architectural feats are equally perplexing. Stone walls, constructed without mortar, fit so precisely that a knife cannot pass between the blocks. How did the Inca achieve such perfection, especially at sites like Sacsayhuaman or Ollantaytambo, where massive stones weighing dozens of tons were moved across rugged terrain? Some propose that they understood the properties of stone in ways lost to us, combining observation, experimentation, and labor-intensive ingenuity. Others wonder if there were methods or tools now forgotten, secrets of engineering that disappeared with the collapse of the empire. The question of the Inca's sudden decline invites further mystery. By the mid-16th century, the Spanish conquistadors had overrun the empire, and disease, warfare, and political fragmentation played decisive roles. Yet the swiftness with which the empire fell, despite its size, organization, and apparent cohesion continues to intrigue scholars. How could a civilization capable of uniting diverse peoples and mastering inhospitable landscapes unravel so quickly? Was it purely the result of European weapons and pathogens, or were there internal tensions, succession disputes, or cultural shifts that left the empire vulnerable? Trade and communication were lifelines of the empire, yet they too hold enigmas. The extensive road system, stretching over 25,000 miles, connected mountains, deserts, and jungles. Tambos, rest stops along the highways, served as hubs for military, administrative, and commercial activity. But what knowledge, culture, and ritual might have traveled along these roads, now largely erased from memory? Did these arteries of empire carry not just goods, but ideas, technologies, or wisdom that vanished with the Spanish conquest? The spiritual and cultural practices of the Inca remain partly obscured. Temples and ceremonial centers suggest a religion deeply connected to the cosmos, the sun, and the mountains themselves. Yet much of what we know comes from post-conquest accounts, filtered through European eyes. What aspects of their belief system, their worldview, or their understanding of nature were never recorded, lost in translation, or deliberately concealed to protect sacred knowledge? Could there be layers of meaning embedded in surviving artifacts and architecture that still elude us? Even their cities provoke questions. Machu Picchu, often called the lost city of the Incas, was unknown to the outside world until the 20th century, suggesting that entire settlements may have remained hidden, abandoned, or forgotten over centuries. Were these retreats ceremonial, administrative, or perhaps refuges in times of conflict? And what might lie still undiscovered in the dense Andean valleys, waiting beneath jungle canopy or buried under centuries of sediment, to tell stories that no chronicler ever recorded? Environmental mastery was central to the Incas' endurance, yet it may also have concealed vulnerabilities. Terraces, aqueducts, and storage systems allowed survival in extreme climates, but they required constant maintenance and a knowledgeable workforce. Did the collapse of these systems accelerate societal decline? Were there factors, climatic shifts, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, that compounded human missteps, leaving the empire suddenly fragile despite centuries of resilience? The Inca also left behind artistic and symbolic mysteries. Ceremonial textiles, metalwork, and pottery reveal a culture of exquisite skill and deeply encoded meaning. Could these objects contain more than decorative or ritual significance, perhaps carrying messages, historical records, or cosmological knowledge that we are only beginning to decode? And what of their oral traditions, passed from generation to generation? How much vanished as communities were displaced, enslaved, or annihilated? Standing among the terraces and ruins today, one feels a sense of scale and silence. The Inca civilization, though extensively studied, continues to speak in fragments. Stone, quipu, terraces, and echoes of ceremonies. Its disappearance is not merely a historical fact. It is a puzzle, a challenge to the modern imagination. How much knowledge was lost with the fall of the empire, and what truths about their society, their understanding of nature, and their spiritual life remain buried, awaiting rediscovery? As the Andean sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows over the ridges and valleys, one is left with a profound awareness of both human achievement and its fragility. The Inca constructed cities that touched the clouds, roads that stitched mountains together, and systems that harmonized with an unforgiving landscape. And yet, in a few decades, much of it vanished from immediate memory. What secrets remain hidden in those stone walls, beneath the terraces, or encoded in the knots of quipu? And what might future discoveries reveal about a civilization that rose to astonishing heights, only to fade into mystery, leaving the Andes as both witness and guardian of their story? Along the banks of the Halil River, in what is now southeastern Iran, the desert stretches wide, its ochre sands rippling under the relentless sun. Amid these seemingly barren plains, archaeologists have unearthed traces of a civilization both ancient and enigmatic, one whose very existence challenges the conventional timelines of human history in the region. This is Jiroft, a city and culture that flourished along the river more than 5,000 years ago, leaving behind artifacts that hint at an advanced society long overshadowed by neighboring Mesopotamian empires. Standing amidst the excavated mounds and the scattered fragments of baked clay, one can almost imagine a city alive with traders, artisans, and priests, where the river nourished crops and ideas alike. The Jiroft Civilization, though still emerging from the shadows of scholarship, reveals startling sophistication. Archaeological discoveries include intricately carved chlorite vessels, some depicting scenes of myth, ritual, and animals unknown in other contemporary cultures. These artifacts suggest not only artistic skill, but also a symbolic or perhaps religious language that remains largely undeciphered. Who were the people who created such objects, and what stories did they intend to tell? Could these intricate carvings contain knowledge or traditions lost to time, glimpses into a worldview that was radically different from that of their neighbors? The city itself, now partially revealed beneath mounds of earth, was likely a center of trade and culture. Evidence suggests extensive connections with Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, and possibly even regions beyond. Materials such as lapis lazuli, carnelian, and precious metals appear alongside native stonework, indicating a network of commerce that spanned great distances. But how did Jiroft, relatively remote in today's geography, manage to attract and sustain such exchange? What routes did traders traverse, and what knowledge and customs traveled with them, leaving faint imprints on this society, yet vanishing almost entirely from our records? One of the most captivating mysteries of Jiroft lies in its writing, or at least its symbols. Unlike the well-known cuneiform of Mesopotamia or the hieroglyphs of Egypt, Jiroft appears to have had its own form of proto-writing. Symbols etched into tablets and vessels hint at communication, record-keeping, or ritual practice, yet scholars have yet to fully decipher them. Was this a formal system of writing, a symbolic code for religious ceremonies, or a method of preserving trade information? And if it was indeed a writing system, how much knowledge vanished with the city's decline, leaving only tantalizing hints for modern researchers to interpret? The decline of Jiroft is equally mysterious. Unlike civilizations that fall to conquest or climate alone, the reasons for its disappearance remain speculative. Some researchers propose seismic activity, given the region's susceptibility to earthquakes. Others point to environmental shifts, drought, river changes, or soil degradation that may have made agriculture unsustainable. Could it have been a combination of natural and human factors? Or are there elements of its decline that remain completely hidden, perhaps deliberately obscured by the very people who once thrived here? The artifacts themselves deepen the intrigue. Some vessels depict strange creatures, hybrid forms, and ritualistic scenes that do not correspond neatly with the mythologies of Mesopotamia or the Indus Valley. Could these images represent a cultural knowledge now lost, or do they point to an independent spiritual and intellectual tradition, one that developed in isolation yet was sophisticated enough to influence distant lands through trade and exchange? And why, despite such evidence of complexity, do we find so few surviving structures, inscriptions, or city layouts? The civilization seems to flicker in and out of history, present in the objects it left behind but almost invisible in the written record. The location of Jiroft, cradled between desert and river, suggests a people intimately connected to their environment. Irrigation systems, cultivated fields, and settlement patterns indicate a deep understanding of water management and agriculture. yet the very landscape that sustained them may have contributed to their disappearance. Could shifting river courses, flooding, or drought have gradually eroded the city's foundations, leaving artifacts but no comprehensive record of daily life, governance, or belief systems? Speculation naturally follows such tantalizing gaps. Some scholars suggest that Jiroft could have been the basis for the semi-legendary errata of Sumerian texts, or perhaps an influential yet forgotten kingdom whose innovations and culture subtly shaped neighboring regions. Others propose that its sudden disappearance reflects not a single catastrophic event, but a slow absorption into emerging cultures, its people and traditions merging into the broader currents of ancient Iran. While these theories remain unproven, they underscore the allure of a civilization that exists in fragments, teasing us with glimpses of brilliance we cannot fully reconstruct. Walking among the mounds, imagining the bustling streets, workshops, and ceremonial spaces, one is struck by the tension between presence and absence. Jiroft's legacy is tangible in the precision of its art, the reach of its trade networks, and the evidence of a city that once coordinated complex human activity. Yet, its absence from broader historical narratives is palpable. A civilization known more through objects than through text, more through speculation than through documented events. What wisdom, traditions, or innovations were lost with its decline? And what stories might still lie buried beneath the sands, waiting for archaeologists to uncover them? As the sun dips toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the Halil River Valley, the mystery of Jiroft lingers. Its people shaped a sophisticated culture, yet their civilization vanished, leaving only echoes carved into stone and clay. What secrets of their society, their trade, their religion, or their knowledge remain hidden, concealed beneath layers of earth and history? And what might future discoveries reveal about a civilization that thrived in obscurity, influencing a world we are only beginning to understand? The story of Jiroft, like the river that winds through its territory, flows quietly through time, whispering hints of a civilization that once flourished, yet remains elusive. It reminds us that history is rarely complete, and that the most compelling tales are those whose full truths continue to elude discovery, inviting us to search, to imagine, and to wonder. Along the sun-baked plains of northern Sudan, the Nile winds its way like a silver thread, carving life into an otherwise arid landscape. Here, between the deserts and the river's fertile banks, lies the land once dominated by the Kerma Culture, a civilization that emerged over 4 millennia ago, long before the rise of Egypt's new kingdom. The site of Kerma, now partially excavated, reveals vast tumuli, burial mounds towering over the horizon, and the remains of structures hinting at complex urban planning. Standing amidst these monumental stones, one cannot help but sense a civilization that was both formidable and sophisticated, yet whose full story has been largely swallowed by the sands of time. Kerma flourished from around 2500 BCE to 1500 BCE, a kingdom that rivaled the might of its northern neighbor, Egypt. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of an advanced society, large mud brick structures, intricate pottery, and remarkably well-crafted jewelry. The city of Kerma itself, sprawling along the Nile, suggests a degree of urban planning and social organization comparable to other great ancient centers. Yet, despite this sophistication, much about Kerma remains tantalizingly elusive. How did a society so distant from the Nile's delta establish such influence and wealth? What strategies allowed them to maintain autonomy while interacting with powerful neighbors like the Egyptians? Trade seems to have been central to Kerma's strength. The kingdom's location allowed access to gold, ivory, ebony, and exotic animals, which were coveted by Egypt and other distant lands. Ceramics and imported goods indicate extensive exchange networks, hinting at a civilization that was both self-sufficient and outward-looking. But what was life like for the people of Kerma beyond trade and craft? What religious rituals, social hierarchies, or ceremonies guided their daily existence? Questions we can only infer from the artifacts and monumental graves that remain. The funerary architecture of Kerma is among its most striking and mysterious features. The tumuli, some reaching over 30 meters in height, served as burial mounds for kings and elites, containing treasures, sacrificial animals, and even evidence of ritual practices. These burial mounds raise questions about Kerma's social and spiritual life. Did these elaborate interments reflect beliefs about the afterlife, the divine right of rulers, or something more enigmatic, perhaps known only to the priests and kings themselves? And why did such a vibrant society leave behind so few records beyond tombs, pottery, and monumental structures? Kerma's interactions with Egypt add layers to its mystery. For centuries, the two civilizations were both rivals and partners, engaging in trade, warfare, and cultural exchange. Egyptian texts sometimes portray Kerma as a land of formidable warriors and wealth, yet the true nature of these encounters remains partially obscured by the perspective of the Egyptians themselves. Did Kerma adopt any of Egypt's administrative or cultural practices, or did it retain a distinct identity, preserving traditions and knowledge that have since been lost? And how did these interactions influence the eventual decline of the kingdom? The decline itself remains a subject of debate. Around 1500 BCE, Kerma was absorbed into the expanding Egyptian New Kingdom, its elite incorporated into Egyptian society, and much of its infrastructure dismantled or repurposed. Yet the exact process of this transformation is unclear. Was it a result of military conquest, political negotiation, or a combination of environmental and social pressures? Could natural factors, such as shifts in the Nile's course, drought, or resource scarcity have played a role in weakening the kingdom from within? These questions linger unanswered as archaeologists continue to uncover the layers of destruction and reconstruction. Artifacts found at Kerma further deepen the enigma. Pottery painted with geometric patterns, finely crafted jewelry, and ceremonial objects reveal both artistry and symbolic complexity. Some items suggest religious or ritualistic practices that are not fully understood, hinting at belief systems and cultural expressions largely inaccessible to modern interpretation. Could there be deeper meanings in these objects? Knowledge of spiritual, cosmological, or social practices that the surviving stones and ceramics only partially reveal? The very landscape of Kerma also holds clues that are open to interpretation. Settlements near the Nile's banks suggest strategic placement for agriculture, trade, and defense, yet vast areas remain unexcavated. Could hidden temples, workshops, or civic centers lie buried beneath the sands, holding secrets of governance, religion, or science? And what stories might future discoveries tell about a society that once commanded wealth, power, and cultural sophistication in the heart of Nubia? Kerma's mystery is compounded by its place in history. For centuries, it existed in the shadow of Egypt, acknowledged only occasionally in foreign texts and often through the lens of its conquerors. Yet its tombs, artifacts, and monumental architecture reveal a civilization that was not merely a regional player, but a force with its own identity, ambitions, and achievements. What cultural, technological, or social knowledge might have vanished with its absorption into Egypt? And how much of Kerma's legacy survives in subtle ways, through art, architecture, or even influences on later Nubian kingdoms that we have yet to fully recognize? As the sun sets over the Nile, casting long shadows across the desert and mounds, one is left with a sense of awe and curiosity. Kerma, a civilization of power, wealth, and ingenuity, lingers as both a tangible and intangible presence. Its stones whisper of kings and commoners, of trade, ritual, and human endeavor. Yet the full story, the voices of its people, the intricacies of their society, the reasons for their disappearance, remains hidden, waiting to be uncovered. What remains buried beneath the sands, and what truths of human civilization lie just beyond our reach, patiently waiting for the light of discovery to illuminate them. Kerma reminds us that the past is often incomplete, composed of fragments that hint at brilliance, complexity, and mystery. Its story, like the Nile itself, flows quietly through history, inviting us to listen, explore, and wonder at the civilizations that once flourished and then vanished, leaving only questions that continue to intrigue and inspire. Across the rolling plains and dense forests of Central Europe, the wind whispers through the grass and the remains of ancient hilltops, carrying with it the memory of a people long vanished. Here, scattered across regions that today comprise Germany, Austria, Czechia, and beyond, archaeologists have uncovered traces of the Urnfield culture, a civilization that thrived during the Late Bronze Age, roughly between 1300 and 750 BCE. At first glance, these lands seem ordinary, dotted with small villages and farmlands, yet beneath the surface lie countless burial sites, pottery shards, and cremation urns that hint at a society both widespread and sophisticated, whose customs, beliefs, and eventual disappearance remain shrouded in mystery. The Urnfield culture derives its name from its most distinctive archaeological signature: cremated remains placed in urns, then buried in carefully arranged cemeteries. Thousands of these burial mounds have been discovered across Central Europe, often containing grave goods, bronze tools, weapons, ornaments, and occasionally ceremonial objects. Each urn tells a fragment of a story, yet the people themselves, their language, and much of their daily life remain elusive. How did they view death, the afterlife, and the cosmos? Were these cremations merely a funerary practice, or did they represent deeper spiritual or societal principles, encoded in ritual that we have only begun to glimpse? The Urnfield culture was far from uniform. Archaeological evidence points to regional variations in pottery design, metallurgy, and burial practices, suggesting a network of loosely connected communities rather than a centralized state. Yet, despite this apparent decentralization, similarities across vast distances indicate shared beliefs, technological knowledge, and perhaps communication or trade routes linking disparate settlements. How did these communities maintain cohesion over such a wide area, and what mechanisms, ritual, kinship, or commerce, helped to unify them? Metallurgy was a hallmark of Urnfield society. Bronze swords, spearheads, and tools reveal advanced craftsmanship and access to trade networks supplying copper and tin. Some artifacts, such as intricately decorated bronze daggers and ornaments, hint at ceremonial or symbolic significance beyond practical use. Were these objects markers of social status, religious devotion, or protective talismans? And if such sophistication existed in everyday life, why do so many aspects of Urnfield culture remain invisible, hidden beneath centuries of earth and the passage of time? The cemeteries themselves pose questions. Urnfields are often arranged in regular patterns, suggesting careful planning and perhaps a symbolic logic we no longer understand. Occasionally, larger burial mounds contain more elaborate grave goods, implying social hierarchy. But the exact nature of political or spiritual authority remains speculative. Did leaders govern through religious influence, martial prowess, or familial networks? And why, after centuries of development, does this culture suddenly vanish from the archaeological record, leaving only the cremated remains in their urns? The disappearance of the Urnfield culture invites both historical and environmental speculation. Some scholars point to climatic shifts, changing river patterns, or soil depletion that may have disrupted agriculture and prompted migrations. Others suggest the arrival of new populations, possibly Proto-Celts, who gradually absorbed or displaced Urnfield communities. Could it have been a combination of ecological stress and socio-political transformation that led to the culture's dissolution? And, intriguingly, were there external pressures, conflicts, trade disputes, or epidemics that remain invisible to us, leaving only silence in their wake? Trade and exchange provide further clues. Urnfield artifacts, including bronze weapons, ornaments, and pottery, suggest extensive contact with distant regions. Some items appear to have been imported from Italy, the Carpathians, or even the British Isles, implying long-distance networks. What knowledge, beliefs, or cultural practices accompanied these goods? Did the Urnfield people influence neighboring societies, leaving subtle traces of their language, art, or ritual that have yet to be recognized? And if so, what might this suggest about the broader story of Bronze Age Europe, a continent in constant flux yet shaped by interwoven civilizations? Religious and ritualistic practices are particularly enigmatic. While cremation is central, the meaning behind specific urn shapes, grave orientations, and accompanying artifacts remains debated. Were these purely symbolic, representing social status or family affiliation? Or did they encode cosmological or spiritual beliefs now lost to time? Occasionally, artifacts depict abstract patterns or motifs whose significance we can only speculate upon, hinting at a symbolic language that the living once understood, but that now eludes us. Even the landscape itself plays a role in the mystery. Many Urnfield cemeteries occupy elevated sites, hilltops or river terraces, chosen perhaps for ritual visibility, strategic placement, or symbolic significance. Could these locations have functioned as both spiritual and social centers, anchoring communities in ways we do not yet comprehend? And how much of this civilization lies buried beneath modern towns, fields, and forests, awaiting discovery, or forever lost to erosion and human activity? The Urnfield culture, though fragmented in evidence, reveals glimpses of human ingenuity, ritual complexity, and regional cohesion. Its cremation practices, metalwork, and distribution across Central Europe suggest a society that was both adaptive and culturally rich. Yet, like the wind sweeping over its ancient burial mounds, much of its story has dissipated into the past. What knowledge, practices, or beliefs were lost with its disappearance? And what might future excavations reveal about the people who once populated these landscapes, leaving behind urns as their silent testament? As dusk settles over the rolling hills, the shadows stretching across the cemeteries evoke both presence and absence. The Urnfield culture endures in fragments of pottery, bronze, and ash, whispering of human lives, beliefs, and endeavors now beyond our full understanding. And yet, these silent remnants challenge us, inviting reflection, investigation, and imagination. How much of this civilization remains buried, waiting to reveal its secrets? And what stories might the ash-filled urns tell if only we could listen closely enough? Along the mist-laden coasts and dense forests of ancient Japan, the sound of waves crashing against rocky shores mingles with the whisper of pine needles in the wind. Here, in valleys carved by rivers and along the fringes of the Pacific, the Jomon people once thrived, a civilization that endured for over 10,000 years, from roughly 14,000 BCE to 300 BCE. The landscape itself seems alive with memory. Shell middens piled high with the detritus of daily life, the charred remains of hearths, and the delicate shards of pottery, all hinting at a society deeply attuned to its environment yet shrouded in mystery. Walking through these ancient sites, one feels the presence of countless generations who hunted, fished, and created, leaving behind traces that are as enigmatic as they are enduring. The Jomon are best known for their distinctive pottery, among the oldest in the world, marked by elaborate cord patterns and intricate designs. These vessels, often used for cooking, storage, or ritual purposes, provide rare glimpses into a society without writing. Each pattern seems purposeful, yet their meaning remains largely speculative. Were they symbolic representations of nature, cosmological maps, or expressions of social or spiritual identity? And why did a culture so technologically capable of crafting ceramics with such complexity remain without writing, leaving only artifacts as a window into their lives? Subsistence and daily life reveal a remarkable adaptability. The Jomon relied on a combination of hunting, fishing, and foraging, exploiting Japan's rich forests and rivers. Shellfish, middens, fish bones, and preserved plant remains tell the story of a people intimately connected to their environment, yet capable of innovation. Pit dwellings and semi-subterranean homes suggest communities with social organization and an understanding of climate adaptation. But what governed their society? How did the Jomon structure their communities, distribute labor, or resolve conflicts? The answers remain tantalizingly hidden beneath layers of soil and time. Archaeologists have uncovered clay figurines, or dogu, whose purpose continues to provoke debate. Often humanoid in form, with exaggerated features and symbolic markings, these artifacts suggest ritualistic or spiritual practices, perhaps linked to fertility, protection, or healing. Could they encode beliefs or cosmologies that we can only glimpse indirectly? And why, over such a long span of time, did the Jomon maintain certain artistic and ritual traditions while allowing others to evolve or vanish without clear explanation? The length and continuity of the Jomon period are themselves remarkable. While other contemporary societies shifted toward agriculture and urbanization, the Jomon maintained a largely hunter-gatherer existence with sophisticated craftsmanship, suggesting a model of complexity not reliant on farming or hierarchical state structures. How did such a society sustain itself for millennia without succumbing to environmental stress, invasion, or resource depletion? Were there societal mechanisms, spiritual practices, or ecological strategies now lost to us that allowed such enduring resilience? Trade and cultural exchange may also have played a subtle role. While largely localized, evidence suggests that obsidian, shells, and other materials traveled across regions, linking communities in networks of exchange. Could the Jomon have influenced or been influenced by neighboring cultures, leaving traces in ritual, art, or technology that survive only in fragments? And if so, what larger patterns of interaction might these remnants hint at? Connections invisible to the casual observer, yet shaping centuries of human development. Environmental changes, too, leave questions unresolved. Rising and falling sea levels, volcanic activity, and shifts in flora and fauna would have affected settlement patterns and resource availability. How did the Jomon respond to these challenges, and did environmental stress contribute to the gradual transformations that marked the end of the period? Or did cultural shifts, such as the adoption of rice agriculture by later Yayoi communities, drive the Jomon into decline and assimilation, leaving their unique practices and technologies to disappear from memory? Their art, like the pottery and dogu, is as mysterious as it is beautiful. Intricate patterns may have reflected social identity, spiritual beliefs, or even abstract thought. Yet much of its meaning is lost. Were these designs purely aesthetic, or did they encode information about lineage, cosmology, or ritual practice? And if such symbolic systems existed, how much knowledge has been irretrievably lost, leaving modern researchers to interpret fragments without a full context? Even the physical landscape conceals secrets. Forested valleys, coastal marshes, and volcanic foothills may hide settlements, ritual sites, and burial grounds yet undiscovered. What could future excavations reveal about the social complexity, spiritual life, or technological innovations of the Jomon? And how much of their culture was deliberately ephemeral, designed to vanish over time, leaving traces that challenge archaeologists to reconstruct a narrative from fragments? As the sun dips over ancient forests and coastal waters, the presence of the Jomon lingers in the earth and artifacts, quietly testifying to a civilization of endurance, creativity, and subtle complexity. Their legacy is paradoxical, simultaneously abundant in material culture yet enigmatic in social structure and belief. How did they thrive for thousands of years, and why did their culture gradually transform and disappear, leaving only fragments behind? The Jomon, like the wind through the trees or the tide washing against the shore, reminds us that civilizations are not always defined by monumental architecture or written records. Some leave whispers, patterns in clay, echoes of ritual, and lessons about resilience and human ingenuity. And though much about them remains hidden, each shard, each hearth, each figurine invites us to imagine a world long gone, a civilization whose mysteries still beckon, encouraging us to wonder what truths about human history remain buried, waiting for discovery. Deep within the dense rainforests of Mesoamerica, where sunlight filters through the thick canopy in dappled patterns and the air is thick with the scent of earth and foliage, the ruins of an ancient civilization lie partially hidden. Stone pyramids rise above the trees, their edges softened by centuries of growth and decay, while plazas and ball courts speak of bustling cities that once thrived in these tropical landscapes. This is the world of the Maya, a civilization that, at its height between 250 CE and 900 CE, stretched across present-day Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador, yet whose sudden decline continues to baffle historians, archaeologists, and anthropologists alike. The Maya were remarkable builders and planners. Cities like Tikal, Palenque, and Copan exhibit intricate architecture, from soaring temples and palaces to precisely aligned observatories. Their understanding of astronomy allowed them to track celestial movements with astonishing accuracy, recording solar, lunar, and planetary cycles in elaborate codices and inscriptions. But how did a society without the wheel or large draft animals construct such monumental works deep within challenging terrain? What engineering techniques and organizational structures allowed them to move massive stones, maintain urban centers, and coordinate labor across vast regions? Agriculture, too, was a cornerstone of Maya life. Terraces, raised fields, and intricate irrigation systems supported dense populations within tropical forests, while maize, beans, squash, and cacao formed the staples of their diet. Yet the Maya were not just subsistence farmers. They were deeply attuned to the rhythms of the environment, blending observation with ritual. Did their agricultural practices include lost techniques of soil management or forest cultivation? Knowledge that allowed cities to thrive for centuries, yet vanished with their decline. Writing and record-keeping were central to Maya culture. The Maya script, one of the most sophisticated writing systems of the ancient world, recorded dynasties, rituals, astronomical events, and myths. But much of this knowledge was destroyed during the Spanish conquest, leaving gaps in our understanding. How much of Maya history, philosophy, and cosmology is irretrievably lost, hidden in codices that never survived, or in glyphs that remain undeciphered? Could these gaps hold answers to the enduring mysteries of their civilization's rise and abrupt collapse? The sudden decline of the Maya between the 8th and 10th centuries CE is one of archaeology's most enduring enigmas. Once thriving cities were abandoned, monuments fell into ruin, and populations dispersed into the surrounding forests. Scholars propose numerous explanations: prolonged droughts, overpopulation, soil degradation, warfare, political instability, or the interplay of multiple factors. But why did some cities endure while others were forsaken? Was there a singular tipping point, or did the collapse unfold as a complex, staggered unraveling of society that left some regions untouched for centuries? Maya religion and ritual were deeply intertwined with daily life and governance. Temples, ball courts, and ceremonial centers reveal a society obsessed with cycles of time, fertility, and the cosmos. Sacrificial practices, both symbolic and literal, were documented in glyphs and oral traditions. Could these rituals have served as mechanisms of social cohesion, political control, or spiritual appeasement? And how much of their belief system, their worldview, or their relationship to nature remains hidden, obscured by the passage of time and the deliberate destruction of records? Trade networks were extensive. Jade, obsidian, cacao, salt, and exotic feathers moved across regions, linking highland and lowland cities. This commerce hints at an economy as complex as it was interdependent, yet fragile. Did disruptions in these networks contribute to societal stress, compounding environmental and political pressures? Could external influences, migration, conquest, or climate-induced scarcity have amplified internal weaknesses, hastening the abandonment of cities? The art and architecture of the Maya remain both beautiful and puzzling. Murals, stelae, and ceramics depict gods, rulers, and mythological scenes with precise detail. Yet the symbolism is often opaque to modern eyes. What cultural narratives, social hierarchies, or historical truths were encoded in these works? Could they conceal lessons about resilience, governance, or the natural world that modern societies have yet to interpret fully? Even the landscape itself seems complicit in the mystery. Hidden beneath forest canopies, satellite imaging has revealed previously undiscovered structures and roads, suggesting that the Maya may have engineered an even more vast and interconnected civilization than previously believed. How much of their society remains invisible, concealed by foliage, silt, or simply forgotten over centuries? And what truths about their engineering, social systems, or spiritual life might emerge from these buried remnants in the future? As the sun sets behind distant pyramids, casting long shadows across the plazas and jungle, one is struck by the paradox of the Maya, a civilization of astonishing ingenuity, astronomical insight, and artistic mastery, yet one that fell into sudden decline, leaving mysteries that continue to puzzle and inspire. What secrets remain in the glyphs, codices, and hidden ruins? And what might future discoveries reveal about a people whose civilization rose with such brilliance, only to retreat silently into the jungle, leaving us to wonder at what was lost, and what might still be waiting to be found? The Maya civilization, like the forest that conceals it, reminds us that history is not always linear or complete. Its ruins, artifacts, and fragmented records speak in whispers, inviting us to explore, question, and imagine. And in those quiet whispers, the past lingers, challenging us to uncover the truths of a society that, though partially obscured, continues to captivate the human imagination. Along the banks of the Euphrates River, where the water glimmers like liquid glass beneath the relentless Mesopotamian sun, the ruins of once mighty cities rise from the sand. Towering mud-brick walls, fragmented ziggurats, and remnants of grand palaces speak of a civilization that dominated the Fertile Crescent for centuries, the Babylonian Empire. At its zenith, Babylon was more than a city. It was a symbol of human ingenuity, ambition, and cultural sophistication. Yet its sudden decline and eventual disappearance leave mysteries that continue to fascinate historians and archaeologists. Walking amidst these ruins today, one can almost hear the echoes of traders, priests, and kings who once walked these streets, their presence lingering in the artifacts, inscriptions, and monumental architecture they left behind. The Babylonian Empire, emerging around 1894 BCE under the leadership of Amorite dynasties, reached its pinnacle under King Hammurabi, who codified one of the earliest known legal systems in human history. The Code of Hammurabi, inscribed upon stone stelae, offers insight into governance, justice, and social order, but also raises questions about the underlying principles that guided such a sophisticated legal framework. How did a society in a harsh and unpredictable environment develop rules so comprehensive, and to what extent did cultural, spiritual, or even mysterious influences shape their understanding of justice? Babylon itself was legendary for its grandeur. Massive walls, gateways adorned with dragons and lions, and the fabled hanging gardens, whether historical fact or a blend of myth and interpretation, convey a civilization obsessed with both protection and beauty. How did the Babylonians manage such ambitious architectural feats without modern engineering tools? Were there techniques, now lost, that allowed them to create enduring structures and to manipulate water in ways still partially unexplained? And what of the gardens, whose very existence teeters between historical record and legend? Do they hint at botanical knowledge or engineering prowess that has vanished from memory? Religion and cosmology permeated every aspect of Babylonian life. Temples and ziggurats served as physical and spiritual centers, aligning with celestial events and reflecting a worldview in which humans and gods were intimately connected. Astronomical observations were meticulously recorded, forming the basis for early calendars and predictions of celestial phenomena. But how much of their understanding of the heavens has been lost, and might some of their methods or insights hold truths that modern science has yet to rediscover? Were their cosmological practices purely spiritual, or did they serve practical purposes for agriculture, navigation, and social coordination, blending the empirical with the divine in ways we barely grasp today? The economy of Babylon was complex and interconnected. Trade flowed along the Euphrates and beyond, connecting Mesopotamia with Anatolia, the Indus Valley, and even Egypt. Grain, textiles, metals, and luxury goods moved through markets and caravans, supporting urban populations and enabling monumental construction projects. Yet the very networks that fostered prosperity may have also contributed to vulnerability. Could disruptions in trade, environmental shifts, or political intrigue have hastened the empire's decline, leaving a civilization that once seemed invincible suddenly exposed to the tides of history? The mystery of Babylon's fall is compounded by layers of conquest and assimilation. Over centuries, the city endured invasions by Hittites, Assyrians, and Persians, each reshaping its culture, infrastructure, and population. Yet even under new rulers, Babylon retained a cultural and spiritual significance that outlasted political power. How did a city repeatedly conquered maintain such a profound identity? What remnants of Babylonian knowledge, belief systems, or social practices were absorbed, transformed, or lost entirely in the wake of conquest? Artifacts and inscriptions offer tantalizing hints. Clay tablets, cylinder seals, and statuary reveal daily life, trade, and ritual practices, yet much remains undeciphered or fragmentary. Could these objects contain coded information about governance, philosophy, or technology that we cannot yet fully interpret? And what insights into the collapse of the empire might they offer, if only we could read the subtleties embedded in symbols, texts, and ceremonial objects? Even the physical landscape holds secrets. The rivers that once nourished Babylon have shifted over millennia, leaving parts of the city buried beneath sediment or obscured by modern development. Could entire neighborhoods, workshops, or ceremonial centers lie undiscovered, waiting to reveal aspects of Babylonian life we cannot currently imagine? And what might these hidden structures tell us about the empire's administration, religion, or social stratification? The paradox of Babylon is striking. A civilization of immense power, knowledge, and cultural influence that ultimately fell into obscurity, leaving us fragments and ruins to interpret. Its monumental achievements, legal codes, and astronomical records testify to human ingenuity, yet its disappearance as a dominant power reminds us of the fragility of even the most advanced societies. What lessons are hidden within its walls, stelae, and ziggurats? What truths about governance, technology, or cosmology remain buried, waiting for future generations to uncover? As the sun sets over the Mesopotamian plain, casting long shadows across crumbling walls and ancient streets, the story of Babylon lingers in fragments and whispers. It reminds us that civilizations, no matter how powerful or sophisticated, are vulnerable to forces seen and unseen. Climatic shifts, human ambition, conquest, and the inexorable march of time. And yet, in the remnants of Babylon, in the clay tablets, temples, and stories passed down through millennia, the past continues to speak, inviting reflection, investigation, and wonder. What mysteries remain buried beneath the sands of Mesopotamia, and what might they reveal about the ambitions, knowledge, and ultimate fate of a civilization that once held the world in awe? On the rugged coast of the modern-day city of Tunis, where the Mediterranean stretches into the horizon, the winds carry whispers of a civilization that once ruled the seas. Carthage, founded by Phoenician settlers from Tyre around the 9th century BCE, rose to prominence as a maritime power whose influence reached across the western Mediterranean. Today, only fragments of its harbors, walls, and ruins remain. Yet these stones speak of a city of remarkable wealth, innovation, and mystery. A civilization whose sudden fall continues to provoke questions about power, resilience, and the fragility of empires. Carthage was more than a city. It was a hub of commerce, culture, and military prowess. The city's harbors, known as the Kothon, were engineering marvels, with artificial basins and docking facilities capable of hosting hundreds of ships. These waters were alive with trade, connecting North Africa to Sicily, Sardinia, Iberia, and beyond. The Carthaginians traded gold, silver, tin, and precious textiles, as well as agricultural products, creating networks that rivaled the greatest of ancient civilizations. But how did they maintain such far-reaching influence from a relatively small city? What knowledge, navigational skill, or maritime technology allowed Carthage to dominate the Mediterranean for centuries? The culture of Carthage was steeped in ritual and religion. Temples dedicated to deities like Baal-Hamon and Tanit were central to civic life, and inscriptions suggest practices both familiar and deeply enigmatic. Archaeologists have uncovered tophets, sacred burial grounds containing urns and the remains of children and animals, raising questions about ritual practices and societal beliefs. Were these rites symbolic, intended to protect and bless the city, or were they expressions of a spiritual system whose logic is lost to us? How did religion intertwine with governance, commerce, and daily life in a civilization that balanced wealth and warlike ambition so precisely? The Carthaginian military was legendary. Famous generals like Hannibal Barca carried campaigns across the Alps and into the heart of Rome, displaying ingenuity, strategy, and determination that modern historians still study. Yet, despite such brilliance, Carthage eventually succumbed to Rome, its cities destroyed, and its influence shattered. How could a society capable of extraordinary feats of planning, logistics, and diplomacy fall so completely? Was it the weight of Rome's ambition alone, or were there internal weaknesses, political divisions, or environmental pressures that made the empire vulnerable at the critical moment? Trade, technology, and innovation formed the lifeblood of Carthage. Ships were constructed with precision, walls and fortifications engineered for defense, and agricultural techniques, particularly in olive cultivation and irrigation, allowed the city to thrive in the often arid North African landscape. Could Carthage have held secrets of engineering, navigation, or agriculture that were lost with its destruction? Knowledge that might have influenced later civilizations yet remains hidden in the sands and waters of history. Carthage's sudden disappearance from the historical stage is as compelling as its rise. Following the Punic Wars with Rome, the city was razed in 146 BCE, its population scattered or enslaved. And yet, traces of Carthaginian culture persisted in North Africa and the Western Mediterranean, absorbed into subsequent civilizations. What elements of their language, religion, or governance survived in subtle ways, influencing societies without leaving a clear record? Could we find echoes of Carthage in the architecture, rituals, or maritime knowledge of later cultures, if only we knew where to look? The artifacts left behind deepen the mystery. Coins, inscriptions, pottery, and statuary suggest a society both sophisticated and far-reaching, yet one whose full story is fragmented. Some objects hint at trade and cultural exchange beyond what textual sources describe, suggesting that Carthage may have been even more interconnected and influential than the historical record indicates. What other objects lie buried beneath modern cities or beneath layers of Mediterranean sediment, silently preserving secrets of this lost civilization? Even the landscape itself is a witness. The strategic location of Carthage, with its access to fertile hinterlands, protective harbors, and maritime routes, shaped its development and eventual vulnerability. Could natural shifts, such as silting of harbors, earthquakes, or changing climate, have contributed to its downfall alongside the relentless pressure of Rome? And how might future exploration, underwater archaeology, or satellite imaging reveal previously unseen aspects of Carthaginian urban planning, fortifications, or trade infrastructure? The paradox of Carthage is profound. A civilization of immense creativity, military genius, and economic prowess, yet one that vanished almost entirely from prominence, leaving only ruins, artifacts, and fragmented accounts from its conquerors. Its story reminds us that even the most powerful societies are vulnerable, and that the traces of their ingenuity often survive only in whispers and shadows. What truths about governance, trade, technology, or spirituality were lost with the city's destruction? And what might we still uncover if we continue to search beneath the Mediterranean sands and within the stones of North Africa? As the sun sets over the modern city of Tunis, casting long shadows across the remnants of Carthage, one is struck by both its presence and absence. The city endures in fragments, walls, harbors, inscriptions, yet much remains hidden, waiting for future generations to piece together its full story. Carthage challenges us to imagine a civilization that thrived in brilliance and ambition, yet vanished in a manner that leaves questions as compelling as the answers we have uncovered. What mysteries remain buried beneath its ruins, and what can they reveal about the fragility, resilience, and ingenuity of human societies? Along the banks of the Upper Nile, where the river widens into tranquil stretches between desert cliffs, the remnants of an ancient civilization quietly endure. The kingdom of Kush, rising in what is now Sudan, flourished for over a millennium, its cities and pyramids standing as silent witnesses to a culture both powerful and enigmatic. From Napata to Meroe, Kushite kings ruled with authority, engaging in trade, warfare, and diplomacy. Yet much of their civilization's internal workings and sudden transformations remain shrouded in mystery. Walking among the ruins today, one can sense the lingering presence of a society that thrived on the edge of deserts, marshes, and fertile riverbanks, yet whose full story has been partially lost to time. The Kushites were exceptional builders. Their pyramids, smaller but steeper than those of their northern neighbor Egypt, are scattered across vast cemeteries, marking royal tombs with precision and ceremonial intent. These structures, made of sandstone and mud brick, hint at architectural knowledge that adapted to local materials and conditions. What engineering principles guided their construction, and how did Kushite builders achieve alignment and scale without the extensive resources available to the Egyptians? Could these monuments also encode cosmological, religious, or dynastic information that modern observers can only speculate about? Kushite society was deeply intertwined with Egypt, alternating between independence and influence. At times, Kushite kings even ruled as pharaohs in Egypt during the 25th dynasty, bridging the cultures of Upper and Lower Nile. This political and cultural interplay raises questions about identity, assimilation, and resistance. How did Kush maintain its distinct cultural identity while adopting, adapting, or resisting Egyptian practices? And to what extent did religious, artistic, or administrative knowledge flow both ways, leaving traces that are still being uncovered? Trade and resources were central to Kushite power. Gold, ivory, iron, and exotic animal products flowed from the heart of Africa to Egypt, the Mediterranean, and beyond. Cities like Meroe became centers of metallurgy and production, particularly for iron, suggesting advanced technological capabilities. Could Kushite techniques in ironworking or urban planning have been lost with the fall of their cities, leaving tantalizing gaps in our understanding of early African technology? And how did such wealth shape their society, economy, and political structures in ways we cannot fully reconstruct from surviving artifacts? The religious and spiritual life of Kush remains partly obscured. Temples dedicated to Amun and other deities, along with ritualistic artifacts, suggest a rich pantheon and ceremonial system, yet the specific practices, beliefs, and hierarchies are only partially understood. How did religious authority interact with political power, and what role did ritual play in maintaining social cohesion or legitimizing kingship? Were there esoteric traditions, perhaps known only to the priesthood or royal family, that have left no trace in the archaeological record? The abrupt transformations of the kingdom of Kush also intrigue scholars. Over centuries, Napata gave way to Meroe as the political and cultural center, reflecting shifts in trade routes, environmental pressures, and social organization. What prompted these changes? Were they deliberate strategic choices, responses to environmental stress, or consequences of external threats? And why did the kingdom eventually decline, leaving Meroe and other cities abandoned, their streets and palaces consumed by sand and vegetation? Artifacts provide glimpses into daily life and artistry, but often raise more questions than they answer. Pottery, jewelry, inscriptions, and statuary depict people, animals, and symbols, hinting at values, aesthetics, and communication systems, yet the full meanings remain elusive. Could these objects encode knowledge of governance, ritual, or technology now lost? And what other treasures, architectural, artistic, or textual, might still lie buried beneath the desert sands, waiting to reveal the complexities of Kushite life? Even the landscape itself is a participant in the mystery. The Nile, both lifeline and challenge, shaped settlement, agriculture, and trade, while surrounding deserts provided both protection and isolation. How did Kushites manipulate their environment to sustain cities, farmland, and mining operations? Were there ecological practices or water management strategies that allowed this civilization to flourish for centuries in such a demanding region? And could the subtle changes in the river, climate, or vegetation have contributed to the kingdom's eventual decline? The paradox of Kush is striking. A civilization of immense adaptability, cultural richness, and political ambition, yet one whose disappearance leaves enduring questions. Its pyramids, temples, and urban layouts suggest power and organization, while its artifacts hint at social, technological, and spiritual sophistication. And yet, much of its history remains in shadow, partially reconstructed from Egyptian records, archaeology, and oral traditions. What stories of governance, innovation, and human experience lie hidden beneath the sands? And what truths about resilience, adaptation, and vulnerability might Kush reveal that could enrich our understanding of human civilizations everywhere? As the sun dips behind distant desert cliffs, casting long shadows across the pyramids of Meroe, the kingdom of Kush emerges not just as an ancient power, but as a whisper from the past, an invitation to explore, reflect, and wonder. Its achievements, mysteries, and disappearance remind us that history is often incomplete, composed of fragments that hint at brilliance, ingenuity, and enigma. What remains buried beneath the sands? And what can these ruins teach us about the civilizations that came before, the knowledge they possessed, and the mysteries we have yet to uncover? Along the jagged coastlines of Scandinavia, where fjords cut deep into the earth and the icy waters of the North Atlantic stretch toward the horizon, the echoes of a formidable people linger. The Vikings, emerging from modern-day Norway, Denmark, and Sweden around the late 8th century CE, were seafarers, traders, and warriors whose influence extended far beyond the cold forests and rugged shores of their homelands. Today, longhouses, burial mounds, and occasional ship remnants offer tantalizing glimpses into a civilization renowned for its exploration, conquest, and craftsmanship, but whose full story remains partially veiled in mystery. Viking ships, the longships for which they are most famous, were engineering marvels. Sleek, flexible, and fast, they could traverse both turbulent seas and shallow rivers, enabling raids, trade, and exploration across Europe, the Mediterranean, and even the North American coast long before Columbus. How did these seafarers develop such advanced naval technology, balancing speed, durability, and navigational skill in an age without compasses? And what knowledge of tides, stars, and currents guided them across waters that still inspire awe in modern sailors? The Viking expansion was driven not only by conquest, but also by trade and settlement. Markets in Dublin, Kiev, Constantinople, and beyond bear testament to far-reaching commercial networks that carried furs, amber, silver, and slaves, as well as ideas and technologies. How did a relatively small population exert such widespread influence? Were there organizational systems, alliances, or cultural mechanisms that allowed them to navigate not only oceans, but the complexities of foreign societies and political landscapes? Daily life in Viking society was a delicate balance between survival, community, and ritual. Longhouses, workshops, and farms reveal the structure of villages and the rhythms of domestic life, while burial sites and grave goods hint at social hierarchy, spiritual beliefs, and the values of honor, family, and legacy. Yet, for all the artifacts discovered, much about Viking governance, law, and internal dynamics remains obscure. How were communities led, disputes resolved, and decisions enforced in a society often characterized as both decentralized and fiercely independent? Religion and ritual played a central role in Viking culture. Gods like Odin, Thor, and Freya shaped worldview, social norms, and martial conduct. Sacrifices, feasts, and ceremonies marked the passage of seasons, victories in battle, and rites of passage. But how much of their spiritual life remains hidden behind the veil of Norse mythology, filtered through later sagas and Christian interpretations? Could there be rituals, symbolic meanings, or practices that were deliberately concealed or lost with the transition to Christianity, leaving us only fragments of a rich spiritual tapestry? The Viking reputation for raiding has long captured imagination, yet it is only one facet of a complex civilization. Many Vikings were skilled farmers, artisans, and merchants, blending aggression with pragmatism. How did they reconcile these contrasting roles, and what motivated the shifts between peaceful settlement and sudden attack? Were there economic pressures, environmental factors, or social imperatives that compelled such bold endeavors into distant lands? And how much of Viking expansion was exploratory or opportunistic rather than purely martial? Archaeological evidence raises further questions. Hoards of silver, runestones, and burial ships reveal a society deeply invested in symbolism, legacy, and the afterlife, yet the meanings of many objects remain elusive. Do these artifacts encode social hierarchies, spiritual beliefs, or historical narratives we cannot fully reconstruct? And what knowledge, technology, or cultural practices vanished alongside settlements, leaving only tantalizing hints behind? The Viking world was shaped as much by landscape as by culture. Harsh winters, dense forests, and narrow fjords demanded adaptation and resilience. Yet, paradoxically, these same challenges may have fueled exploration, prompting journeys to distant lands such as Iceland, Greenland, and Vinland in North America. What inspired such audacity, and how did Vikings navigate these unfamiliar territories with such precision and endurance? Could there have been lost methods of navigation, survival, or environmental knowledge now inaccessible to us? Despite their formidable presence across Europe, the Viking civilization eventually transformed, absorbed into the kingdoms and nations of the medieval era. Raiding gave way to settlement, paganism to Christianity, and autonomy to integration within emerging states. How did a culture so influential and far-reaching fade into history, leaving only fragments of language, art, and mythology? And what secrets of governance, exploration, or social organization were lost in the transition from Viking society to the medieval kingdoms that succeeded them? As the sun sets behind the fjords, casting elongated shadows over ancient mounds and coastal villages, the Viking civilization stands as both presence and absence. Their ships, artifacts, and stories remind us that even the most audacious societies are impermanent, yet their legacy whispers through landscapes, sagas, and silent stones. What remains buried in the lands and waters they once traversed? And what might future discoveries reveal about a people whose courage, ingenuity, and mystery continue to captivate the human imagination? The Vikings, like the icy seas and rugged coasts they mastered, challenge us to consider resilience, ambition, and adaptation. Their civilization invites reflection on the forces of history, the fragility of human achievement, and the mysteries that endure long after the last ship has vanished from sight. What truths of their daily lives, spiritual practices, and extraordinary journeys remain hidden, waiting to be uncovered beneath the fjords, forests, and fields of Scandinavia? Along the fertile banks of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, where the land undulates between marshes, plains, and rugged hills, the remnants of one of the ancient world's most formidable empires linger in the silent earth. The Assyrian Empire, rising in the early 2nd millennium BCE and reaching its peak between the 9th and 7th centuries BCE, dominated Mesopotamia with unmatched military prowess, sophisticated administration, and monumental architecture. Today, the ruins of palaces, temples, and fortified cities offer glimpses into a civilization that once commanded vast territories, yet much about its internal workings and eventual decline remains shrouded in mystery. Walking through the site of Nineveh or Nimrud, one can almost sense the echoes of a society that shaped history through both innovation and conquest. The Assyrians were architects of power. Cities like Ashur, Nineveh, and Nimrud were meticulously planned, featuring massive walls, gates adorned with winged bulls, and palaces with intricately carved reliefs. These constructions reveal not only engineering skill, but also a profound understanding of symbolism and authority. How did the Assyrians coordinate labor, materials, and logistics to erect such monumental structures in an era without modern machinery? Could these architectural feats encode political, religious, or astronomical knowledge that remains partially unreadable today? Military might define much of Assyria's influence. Renowned for their disciplined armies, advanced siege techniques, and strategic innovations, the Assyrians expanded their empire across Mesopotamia, Anatolia, Levant, and Egypt. Accounts of campaigns, captured in reliefs and inscriptions, reveal precision, organization, and often ruthless efficiency. Yet questions linger. How did this empire sustain such relentless expansion over centuries? Were there unrecorded strategies, social structures, or technologies that allowed the Assyrian military to dominate so extensively? And what role did psychology, diplomacy, and intelligence play in their campaigns? Assyrian society was complex, with a hierarchy that integrated kings, officials, priests, merchants, and artisans. Palaces and temples were centers of political, religious, and economic life, while trade networks connected the empire to distant regions for timber, metals, and luxury goods. Yet despite these advances, aspects of daily life remain opaque. How did local communities interact with imperial authority? What mechanisms of governance, taxation, or cultural assimilation allowed such an empire to maintain cohesion across vast and diverse territories? Religion and ritual infused Assyrian life. Temples dedicated to Ashur, Ishtar, and other deities formed spiritual and political hubs, while religious festivals reinforced loyalty to the king and the state. Reliefs and inscriptions suggest elaborate ceremonies, sacrifices, and symbolic representations, yet the precise meanings of many practices are still debated. Did these rituals serve purely spiritual purposes, or were they intertwined with political power, social control, and public psychology? And how much knowledge of Assyrian cosmology, divination, or priestly practice has been lost to the passage of time? Art and symbolism provide both clarity and enigma. Bas-reliefs depict gods, kings, soldiers, and captives with striking detail, conveying narratives of conquest, devotion, and authority. Yet the full extent of their cultural and symbolic language remains partially obscured. Could there be hidden messages or layers of meaning in these artworks, codes of diplomacy, warnings to rivals, or instructions for governance that modern observers cannot fully interpret? And what does the presence of such highly detailed art suggest about literacy, education, and communication within Assyrian society? The empire's sudden decline adds another layer of mystery. By the late 7th century BCE, Assyria, despite its might, was overrun by a coalition of Babylonians, Medes, and others, leading to the abandonment of its great cities. Why did a civilization so skilled in warfare, administration, and diplomacy collapse so rapidly? Were internal divisions, environmental pressures, or economic strain contributing factors, or did external forces alone seal its fate? And what lessons about resilience, adaptability, or fragility might be hidden in the remnants of this vanished power? Artifacts and ruins continue to intrigue archaeologists. Clay tablets, inscriptions, weaponry, and ceremonial objects reveal glimpses of governance, trade, and belief, yet many questions remain. How did the Assyrians record knowledge, and what was lost when libraries and archives were destroyed? Could undiscovered sites, buried beneath the shifting Mesopotamian landscape, provide new insights into administration, culture, or technological innovations? Even the landscape itself preserves clues. The Tigris and Euphrates, along with shifting deserts and floodplains, shaped settlement, agriculture, and trade. How did Assyrian engineers manage water, cultivate land, and sustain dense populations in such a challenging environment? Could environmental changes, combined with social and political pressures, have hastened the empire's downfall, leaving behind ruins that continue to challenge interpretation? The paradox of Assyria is striking. A civilization of unparalleled ambition, sophistication, and influence, yet one whose sudden disappearance leaves questions as compelling as the answers we possess. Its palaces, temples, and inscriptions offer evidence of brilliance and organization, while its abrupt decline invites speculation, interpretation, and wonder. As the sun sets over the plains and riverbanks of ancient Mesopotamia, one is reminded that even the most powerful empires are vulnerable to forces both human and environmental. The Assyrian Empire, like the land it ruled, endures as both presence and absence. Its ruins, artifacts, and scattered inscriptions speak to ingenuity, power, and mystery, challenging us to piece together the narratives of a civilization that rose to dominate the ancient world. What remains hidden beneath the ruins, and what might future discoveries reveal about the people, innovations, and strategies of this extraordinary empire that shaped history yet vanished into the sands of time?